If I can see where we are.
We are live.
We are live. All right.
I feel like I'm zoomed in way more than you.
I feel like I'm zoomed out way more than you. I'll
I
just
like
leave. I just
I'm too I'm way too close to the camera here, and I feel
well,
like
you
I need
exfoliated,
to,
so
like,
I think you're
back up a
okay.
little bit or something so that it's
My the problem is when I have it on my other monitor, I've got two monitors here. I feel like all it
Are you
shows is
bragging right now? I have 2 monitors. I only have 1, dude.
that one
Quit
of them's
showing
not
me
even
up.
hooked up. It's just for looks. All right. Looks like we're live. I am Joe Worley, biomechanical diversity volunteer, narrator, and I'm here with Mr. Steve Campbell, or is it Campbell?
Campbell. Well, it's spelled Campbell, that's how when people are like, "How do you spell Campbell?" And I'm like, "Seriously, have you never had soup before?" So, yeah, it's Campbell is how you spell it, and Campbell is how you pronounce it, just
Okay,
like you
but
would.
as a professional eater, I have to say I don't always say the things I'm eating out loud. Are
You
you
don't?
supposed to do that? Is
Well,
it
you don't
like
have to say it out loud, but I mean, if they're asking how you spell it, and I'm like, "If you've never had Campbell's soup
that's true, yeah.
before," w you know?
The only thing I say out loud when I eat it is steamed dumplings. Every bite, I'm like, steamed dumplings."
That's fair, I check, yeah.
It started with, Kung Fu Panda, strangely. I don't know what happened. I was watching Kung Fu Panda and, Tfue and Jack Black were fighting over a steamed dumpling. I'm like, "That thing must be delicious." And
They're
I'm not
lovely.
joking. For 2 years, I've been craving steamed dumplings. Usually when you're craving something and you eat it, that craving goes away, not with me. I just want more
Wait,
steamed dumplings.
does that mean that you first watched Kung Fu Panda only 2 years ago?
No, I rewatched it. The
Okay.
itch hit me for steamed dumplings. I got kids of all ages, literally 18 to 1. So I make poor life
You have an
decisions.
18-year-old.
Uh-huh.
Uh, aren't you just over 18 yourself? Like, I'm
I'm
very
19 and
confused.
a half, but I started
Oh,
young. No,
clearly, my
I
word.
was so actually a little bit of a backstory on me. I was a corpsman, like a field medic for Marines. And so actually when I got hurt, it was September 17th of 2004.
Did you a
Um
paper cut, or what do you mean you got hurt?
Well, it was close. It was more like a roadside bomb, and I was on foot. Well, I was on feet. After the bomb, I was on foot. So I got hit by this thing. Yes, exactly. Steam dumplings are life. But after I got hit by this thing, really one of my motivating factors for just pushing through was my 3-month-old daughter. I'd never even met her, and so now she's
Wow.
18, and she cost us a lot of money.
Wow.
So that's what
That's
makes me different and important. That's my whole, if you're ever boring, just get good and blown up. You'll get a cool metal leg, and the parking is killer. Parking is killer.
that's fantastic. Yeah, that seems a little bit more invasive than a paper cut, I have to say.
Yeah, it was. And it's funny, getting blown up feels like getting hit by a mattress when you're in a pillow fight with the Incredible Hulk. Like it doesn't actually like we're way off the rails here. We're narrators talking about this. But anyway,
I don't
I mean,
mind, I'm interested. I'm curious to know a little bit more about it because, yeah, I don't know anybody that has been blown up before, so, learning that it sounds like you got hit by a ma or feels like you got hit by a mattress from The Incredible Hulk is
yeah.
an interesting way to describe it.
And then really the worst part is it's like the bee sting feeling of like when your leg is asleep and it wakes up. It's
Mm,
just your whole body does that. Because all the blood from the pressure pushes away from the source of the explosion. So as
right.
the blood starts pouring back into your body, it feels like, an outtake from My Girl.
My word. So you remained conscious after
Mhm.
the explosion
Yeah, my
for
mom
a
always
period of
said I had a
time, or
thick head. Oh yeah, I was able to put my own tourniquet on and
are you
everything.
serious?
Yeah. And a lot of that, I mean, it's training and being around other people and the first vehicle that I was trying to get to when I was running from the second vehicle to the first vehicle on a bridge. Normally we would circle the wagons, but because we were on a bridge on an overpass, we couldn't do that. We just had to, and we couldn't punch through because we had a disabled vehicle. So I'd jump out and go running up. So I was on foot, and I was the only medic, corpsman. And so when I got hit, and honestly, like I said, my daughter, it sounds crazy, but I had gotten like a pin, like a vote for Pedro, but it had her little ugly face on it, and I had it in my cargo pocket. And so I kind of was just sort of like on autopilot, and I reach into my pocket and get this and getting to get my tourniquet, and I felt that little pin, and it was just like cold water in the face.
Mm.
I just got out of my head right there, and I mean, I won't say it was easy, but it went from an impossible situation to something much more manageable, I would say.
So did you feel like I mean, I'm sorry, I wanted to kinda talk about this for a little minute, I hope that's okay,
Absolutely,
but
yeah.
so when you're running, you get hit,
Hmm.
did you have that process where you were like, "I'm dead?"
Oh
Or
yeah.
does or was it just like, "Oh, what happened? I don't even know," and then when you look down, you see your leg and like, what were the things that kind of like you just said that you like saw your daughter that brought you back into the moment, but
Yeah.
in those first moments, you were where were you at mentally? Like, I can't even imagine.
So, the whole process is just it's kind of a do what you gotta do because you're so emotionally invested in what you're doing. So, for instance, I wasn't just running to a disabled vehicle; those were my Marines. These are people that
Right.
I'd been in Fallujah, Iraq with for 7 months, and here I was, and this is a total side story. We won't go off on it, but I lost most of my second squad on Labor Day, 11 days before that.
Oh my
So
word.
in my mind, it was like I have to get there. I can't lose anybody else. And so I went running up there, and the first vehicle had literally been absolutely destroyed. And so what they will do, or would do, this is, good Lord, we're coming up on 19 years now, but they would use one vehicle and disable it with a bomb, and then they would use another bomb to try to hit whoever showed up, medics specifically. So I specifically I had to run up there to try to help the vehicle. And so when I got hit, as big as that first one was, I just logically, and I'm optimistic. I'm not somebody who, I don't pour mouth. I mean, I got off all my meds. I don't, like, my whole thing is like work on yourself constantly,
Mm,
mind, body, spirit. And so I'm not one of those people that just gives up, but objectively, I felt like I was probably dead. Being optimistic is a choice for me. It's not something that I just wake up floating every day. But it's easy. It's like anything, you practice. And so for me, that objective moment of being like, yeah, this is probably it. And but I'm not a quitter. And so, I was laying face down. I remember going up in the air. I remember hitting the ground. And when I rolled over, I was like, I can do this. I mean, it's an amputated leg. Obviously, it's serious, but I was so objective in that moment. Especially once I reached in for the tourniquet and got that sort of cold water to the face moment that I talked about with my daughter.
right.
Um, it was all very change of tire, with a side effect of pain. um, but I don't know. People will often undermine themselves, and I just say that I didn't know that I could have done something like that, and you don't know whether or not you could.
Right.
So I tell people, don't oversell yourself, but don't. We had guys that were like paunchy and like 35-year-old failed accountants from Nebraska that were just warriors. It's
Hmm.
just they were not made for that civilized life. And they show up, and then you got guys that are tri-state wrestling champions who literally wet themselves the first time a gunshot. And you're thinking it's going to be the other way around. You got this, like,
Right.
shredded dude who's used to performing under pressure, and then you got some guy who's like went to prom with a lunch lady, and then you never know what people are made of, man.
Yeah,
You don't.
that's
You never
true.
know. And for me, it was, I think, a lot easier because I had such a fantastic support system.
Mm,
And so that moment of realizing, hey, I can do this, just sort of translated into, I, y- you know, I never stopped. Hey, I can do this. I'm just sort of like always, you know, pushing. I had some downtime, Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't be
You
human
took
if I
you took
didn't
the
have.
weekend off. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
I had like 30 surgeries, so I took about a year and a
Good
half off.
lord. Good
But
lord.
retirement makes me big. I put on like 60 pounds, and I was like, I gotta do something.
It looks like you put on those 60 pounds in your biceps alone.
My biceps alone. I that You're so sweet, Steve. I can't wait to see you in real life.
It's
I'm gonna hug you.
yeah, I'm afraid if you hug me, I might pop, so be
I'm very
gentle.
gentle. I haven't popped anyone in years.
Oh, good. You've been practicing.
I've been practicing.
Mhm.
TJ, appreciate you, buddy. And I'm glad to hear that we don't use rails here, Jay. I'm not a very good train conductor.
I mean, it's just incredible. Yeah, and the fact that you were able to not only have that happen, get yourself to a position where you were able to survive, and then after that
Mhm.
comes the aftermath of recovery, and a lot of people, when something like that happens, it understandably, it can be very easy to feel like everything that I had in my life as far as hopes and dreams and plans for the future is all shot to hell. I might as well be giving up right now. And the fact that you didn't, not only the fact that you managed to survive that and you took care of what needed to be taken care of, the fact that then from that point on, you continued to persevere and push and become, the man you are now shows that you have that strength of character that is able to weather a lot of hardships. And it's incredible. So, yeah, my
I
hat's off to you,
appreciate it, man.
sir.
Normally, I would deflect with humor, but I've been working on. I mean, objectively, it's hard to take compliments. I
It
mean,
is. Yeah.
especially like I'm not going to get into anything gendery, but guys generally don't know what to do with compliments, and so I've tried to make it a point to compliment people when I mean it. I'm not going to be like your hair smells nice when I'm at the
Do
convenience
you say
store.
it really low and soft like that in their ear when,
I
"Your hair
tried to
smells
just
nice."
literally use my breath.
When
Give me one. Let me hear
when you're
that.
when you're standing when you're standing on behind them on the bus and you just like there's a stranger like, "Mm, your hair smells nice." Like, it just and you have a little bit of that quaver in there that makes it like you're just beyond like, "Your hair smells nice." Mm, yeah.
Oh no, you got it. I got it even better here. Now you lean in and you go. I gotta stop smiling. Do you have a method to calm down when you're laughing?
Not that. Um
No, you got to say, "Did you change your shampoo?" Now, see,
'Cause
now
that
there's a
that
history. You've
yeah,
built
that
a
adds a creep on another
backstory.
level where you've been following them. You know them. I think the one that's like, there's no way there's no way anyone, I don't care how attractive you are, I don't care how sexy you say it, the moment that you use this one word, in regards to a person's body, you've wrecked it and you are now immediately a creep. Uh, and that's mouth. The second that you put mouth in there, it's like, you got a pretty mouth. You're like, it just you've hit another level of, "Oh my lord, I'm scared." So, yeah, it just like, you can say lips, you can say smile, you can say eyes, you can say lots of stuff.
Yeah,
But the second you put in mouth, unless you're already established and you're in a, you know, I wanted to say something, but maybe I shouldn't.
yeah.
Um, going down a dangerous path there. But yeah, there's not very many places where you can say that where you don't already have an established relationship that it turns into, okay, that's fine.
Same thing with the word moist in general.
Mm,
I mean,
yeah.
just in general, like you could say my, knees weak, palms are sweaty, but if you said knees weak, palm is moist. That's
Yeah. There's a I don't know if how familiar or famous they were or whatever, but there was a band called Moist. Did you
no.
ever
I'm adding
listen to
that to
them?
my Spotify like to listen to list.
They're actually in the '90s, they were pretty big here
Yeah.
in Canada at least, and, yeah, that was the name of their band, and ironically enough, my wife, when she was in junior high, she went to a rock concert, and Moist was one
Hmm.
of the bands there, so she got a T-shirt that had "Moist" right on the front of it,
Oh,
A
wow.
black T-shirt with just it was a white box banner with the black of the moist was written in black
Uh-huh.
inside it, and it was small. And she was tiny, right? Like especially at the time, but she kept it with her for years. And then when we started dating, and then eventually when we got married, it was the 90s. So
Yeah.
everything everyone wore was huge and baggy. So she had this shirt that was big enough that I fit it as a grown man. So for a long time, I wore a T-shirt with moist on the front of it, and then it
Where
had
is it?
their dates and locations across the back.
Where is it, and will you wear it to the next con that you go to?
I think that it's gone now. That was a solid
Oh,
20 years ago. So
yeah.
yeah, it's I think that one managed to hit the way of the dodo. Though it is possible I still have it. I still have pants that I bought 25 years ago.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, I don't think they fit me anymore, but they're there.
That's okay. They're nostalgic value. They still
It's
fit your heart.
it's a goal. It's a eventually these might fit me again
Yeah.
if I dream big enough. So
Hi, Legion. All right, so let's introduce you. We've talked about me way more than I'm comfortable, so let's move on since
well,
I'm
we're
trying
talking about
not
you
to
more. Don't worry
deflect
about that.
anymore. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and and I have a follow-up question, obviously.
Hmm.
Go ahead.
Okay, well,
Oh, that was really open-ended.
yeah,
Sorry.
I'm like, where do I start? I was conceived in, like
I was born in a small town.
I was born in a small town. How did you know?
Nice, nice.
Dawson Creek, BC, mile 0 of the world famous Alaska Highway. I think there's about 12,000 people there when I was born.
Mhm.
It hasn't grown much larger than that.
And now there's
And,
11,999 because you left. You left, Steve.
hey, Jez, how's it going, brother?
Jez, how's it going, man?
Um, yeah, yeah, the weird thing is this is a tiny podunk town in northern BC, Canada,
Mhm.
and yet everywhere I go, even when I was like on tour and visiting, places in the Far East, in northern U.S. and all over the place, everyone knows frickin' Dawson Creek because everyone in
Yeah.
the States knows the Alaska Highway, and this is that place where not only do people know of it or whatever, but most of them have people that have either lived there or their parents visited there or
Mhm.
whatever, all over the place in the weirdest situations. Someone will be like, "Oh yeah, I grew up in Dawson Creek," or "I moved to
Really?
Dawson Creek when I was whatever." Or, "Yeah, I spent 3 years in Dawson Creek doing," and I'm like, "How in the hell did this little tiny black hole of hell become this hub that everybody seems to have to traverse at one point or another in their life?"
Yeah.
It's
I
really
mean, and
strange.
completely unrelated to the show, right?
Yeah,
Obviously.
though I will say, that, again, when I was doing this tour thing and we would finish up our performance and then we were supposed to introduce ourselves and we would say our name and where we were from, and I would say,
Mhm.
I'm Steve from Dawson Creek, BC, and you would hear people, "You're from that TV show?" And then people would come and ask me, and I got tired of trying to explain that that's like, "No, no, no, that's called Dawson's Creek,
Yeah.
and the character was Dawson, but the town wasn't called that, dot, dot, dot," and trying to explain the whole thing. And so finally I just started going, "Yeah, in fact, I'm dating Katie Holmes." "You are?" So, yeah.
Okay, so we loved Katie Holmes in Iraq. We watched the Dark Angel series when on
Mm,
this little like screen. I mean, you got like 10 guys sitting around this portable DVD player watching back-to-back episodes because we would go out for 2 or 3 days. We'd come back for like 17 hours. You'd think that guys would want to sleep, but actually you just want to pretend like you're not there. So everyone just crowds around this tiny screen. You have to turn the subtitles on. And so I bought Dawson's Creek actually after because of her. She sold me on 2 seasons of Dawson's Creek and we watched I think we got through one of those
yeah.
after Smallville, of course.
Yeah. Well, I had actually, I had heard of the show, but I'd never seen any of it,
Yeah.
and so people kept on asking me, and I was like, "I've never seen any of the show," and so then when I was in Fredericton, New Brunswick,
Yeah.
and, I was staying at a person's house, and, uh, their daughter was like, you have to see it," and
Yeah.
so she made me binge watch almost the first season one afternoon when we were off,
Mhm.
and, uh, and sat me down and was like, "You have to watch this show," and then I was like, "Yeah, I'm I'm a fan of Katie Holmes, so yeah,
Yeah.
this is cool." I don't mind that at all.
I
Uh,
loved, like,
Vanderbeek seemed a
Pacey's
little
vernacular
whiny.
in general. He was just like a walking thesaurus. I
I
probably
know, hey?
learned half of what I learned as a teenager, like, English-wise from Pacey on Dawson's Creek.
Didn't it ever make you feel inadequate when you'd be watching shows like that or,
Mhm.
like Juno or something where they
Oh,
have,
yeah.
like, this incredibly intelligent and sophisticated way of talking,
Mhm.
and you'd be like, "I am so much a plebe. I can't do this at all." And I
Yeah.
used to think that, "Okay, well, now I need to make sure that I'm able to talk really quick and that I'm really sharp and that I can come up with these witty repartees really
Mhm.
quickly." The challenge for me was because I had ADHD unknown to me,
Yeah.
my brain works really, really quickly.
Mhm.
Um, so I always feel like I'm going really slow or that a thing is happening really slowly. So I would feel like I need to get it out really fast. Um, and have it be, like, just lightning quick that I'm getting that comeback or that snapback. The problem is that usually the first thought you have is not always the right one to have, and so you say some really wildly inappropriate stuff and go,
Yeah.
"Oh, that was really wrong. Oh, that yeah, now I'm cringing forever," and people are like, "Steve, don't what? That was too much, dude. Cross the line." I'm like, "I'm sorry." And then I learned because my brain was working faster that I could just slow it down
Yeah.
and it wouldn't seem like if as I tried to practice it, someone would say something and I would give myself a beat to make sure that what I was saying I was gonna say was gonna actually be okay, and
Mhm.
then I would say it, and it still came across as, "Wow, that was really funny," and it hit as if it had been like a big snappy thing, although for me, it felt like that was like a mountain of
Ages.
time
Yeah.
before
You're able to control the timing when you don't just pop it off, and so
right.
sometimes a pregnant pause can really. So let me ask you this, when you get into a so, habit-wise, when you're, you're on a roll, sometimes you're going and you're going and you're narrating, you feel like that was a really clean, like, 10 minutes there. Do you find
Well, that
yourself
I've never had
listening?
that happen. 10
Well,
minutes?
I don't mean it, like the ship it, we're done. I just mean more like, when you're doing your first couple of passes, you're like, I really got into a good roll there, and then you listen back and you're like, I sped up. I kept going faster and faster. Once you get clean, because for me, I have to make it a point to borderline over enunciate,
Mm.
and so once I get comfortable doing that,
That's
I
because you're
tend.
American.
I think so. See, I was going to ask you, how do you as a Canadian, so I grew up in Georgia, so it's, people are always asking me. If I get excited, the accent is way noticeable, and people from the north can definitely hear my accent, but I can almost turn it off when I really need to.
Right.
Do you feel like that was something that affected you that you had to overcome yourself? I mean, you know, Canada has a fairly neutral, as long as you're not like out in the wings.
Well, I was born and raised, like I said, in Western Canada,
Uh-huh.
and there's a lot of different Canadian accents.
Yeah,
People don't they're just like, "Oh, it's a Canadian accent." Well, no, there's a lot. Even if you don't include, Quebec, which has its own
yeah,
French, and then you don't include Atlantic Canada that has their own interesting thing, and then you go to Newfoundland, and Newfoundland has, so many accents, 30 minutes down the road, it's completely different.
yeah,
But Western Canada, we don't have as it's not as harsh or as thick as, "Oh, yeah, hey, how's it going?" So,
yeah.
we don't have that really here, eh? So, we don't really sound like that too much here in Western Canada. That's more on the East Coast or, like, in Toronto or something where they might sound like that.
Like
So
Bobby's mom.
yeah, or like, Bob and Doug McKenzie, right?
Yeah.
"You hoser. Hey, what's going on, eh? So, get some back bacon, eh?"
Back bacon.
And so, I found out actually when I started looking into audiobook performance and
Mhm.
narration and VO and stuff that, uh, all of our news anchors from Western Canada are snapped up by Middle America because we are really, um we don't have a strong accent,
Yeah.
and we have a very clear way of speaking and enunciating.
Uh,
So our speech isn't as lazy, and and so the news anchors keep getting snapped up.
yeah,
And so I thought, hey, I'm great. As long as I don't say sorry and I say sorry and I don't say oat, I say, oat and about, I'm okay. I'll be good. And so that was my thing going into narration. In my first couple of books I started working on. And I had one that came in, I think it was my second book. I had a review that came in on it. It was like, I like the narrator, but I couldn't figure out where he was from. And it was kind of like he just said some stuff that was really weird. And
yeah,
I couldn't place his accent, but maybe he's British. I don't know. Because I would say been instead of been and
uh-huh,
against instead of against, right? And and so that was when I was like, okay, no, we do still have an accent here.
yeah.
It just isn't as pronounced as some of what the other people are portraying, and so I took some dialect coaching to work on my Canadian accent to reduce that so that I knew how to talk like I was American, right?
Yeah,
So
classes are for quitters. Come on, just muscle through it. The first time I heard you was actually Nathan's books, the Fae Path, and so that's what I ended up listening to a few more after that, but that's I heard exactly what you said, which was you enunciate well and you've got a good smooth cadence. So
well, and it was actually like Americans that told me that Americans are really lazy in their speech and they don't
yeah,
they kind of muddle it through a little bit. So
I'd like to get angry and punch a hole in the wall, but I feel like you're right.
it wasn't me that said it. I was like, "Oh, dang, okay."
Well, I know, but I'm American, so I'm supposed to be overly defensive about
Yeah,
things.
yeah, you have to, "No, we're not. How dare you?"
So, do you want to tackle Jay's request there? Did you see that?
I didn't see, what is Jay's
Yeah, he
request?
started. Hmm.
Uh, "Oh, we're doing voices now? How about a black guy from SoCal who thinks he's a dwarf?" You know what? I just did my Canadian, so maybe you should handle
Oh,
that one.
heavens. All right. Let's see here. You see, no, God, hold on. You got some of these. So I think I need to layer it. So I think I'll start out with like, you see, heroes with all their power and bravery. So how do I go from that into adding in? You see, SoCal though, because then you got to add in like the interstates and all that, and you're going to take a ride at was it the SNL skit?
Yeah. "Get off at
Let's
the
see here.
205 and"
205, homie.
Yeah.
You see,
"Sir, what do you
you're gonna
mean?"
want to take the 205, homie. I, I don't know. I probably need a script specifically for that.
It's hard, isn't it? Well, like, this is one of the things that, like, when as narrators, and I know it kinda comes with the territory, but, um, it's funny to me when like, either people, in IRL are meeting you and they're like, "Oh, you're a voice actor? Oh, you do narration? Okay,
Yeah.
so do some voices, do some whatever," and you like, "I no, I things are written for me. I don't come up
Oh
with
yeah.
stuff. It's written for me, so I can read it, and if it's not there for me to read, it's a lot harder. And so when you're doing interviews and they're like, okay, okay, do an accent, do whatever. And it's like sometimes you can get some of those that you
uh
have in your back pocket, but other times, no, it takes we sit here and agonize over this kind of stuff. And
yeah.
I had
And
one
it
of
takes time. I mean, you have to build a voice
oh yeah.
sometimes.
I had one of the a number of times I've had issues with this, but um one was I had a person who thought that it was literally like they were just able to pick things out of a magazine.
Um,
So they were like, "Okay, so this character, I want them to be like a Russian Steve Buscemi, and this one, I want them to be a Scottish John Lithgow,
oh,
here." And I was like,
easy.
"Wow," like, those are incredibly detailed,
Yeah.
and it's like, "Okay, what do I do with that now?" And then I had another author who was talking to me about their series, and they're like, "Okay, so there's 3 different types of people, and this is a lovely person." I love authors, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but it sometimes is like, they just you don't know what you don't know, and
Uh-huh.
they just assume that because we're voice actors, we have all of this sitting in our back pocket, and it's no
Mhm.
problem for us to throw it out at all. So they're like, "Okay, so 3 different races. These people, well, they'll kind of sort of be American, and these ones I kind of feel like they're British and
Yeah.
like, that works. And these people, they're from well, when I was in the military, there was this town, it wasn't quite in Iraq, it was sorta kinda close to Kazakhstan, but it wasn't that, and he had a hard time even naming the town.
Yeah.
He's like, "There's no references to how their accent was, but, like, if you could do something like that was in that town, that would be great for these people." And I'm like,
You're giving me like a third tier dialect.
"What?"
Like
And then they're like, "Oh, and these people, they're sort of like Spanish, but yeah, that's an easy accent, so you'll just be
yeah.
able to, you know." And it's like, "Oh, Spanish is just easy to whip out," you know, like, "Okay, sure." It's
That do so I was gonna ask you this actually. Do you have a particular accent that gives you issues?
Oh, I have
So
lots of accents that give me issues.
so for me personally, I tend to go from like common or British straight into pirate. And
Yeah,
there's I don't know what it is. And if I start doing it, there is no fixing it. I
yeah.
literally have to just mark it, move on, come back. It's a nightmare.
So let me hear your common or British, and then if it goes into pirate, I'll be really
All right.
excited.
Listen here, Gov. Let me tell you something. You're not coming through this gate until see. It's I started doing it right there. You're not coming through this gate until you take my leg.
"Arr, we're gonna get
Arr!
through this. I got my pirate here."
If
And
I'm not saying
you have the
Gov,
peg leg already, so I mean, this is where
yeah,
that's where it comes from, honestly.
I think
You
I think it's a part of like my personal issues that I'm gonna have to work through. Probably, by talking to someone. But why not just muscle through,
you know,
and
yeah.
just ignore all the other issues? Oh, baby,
Well,
please. Oh, baby, please come through this gate.
there
Oh,
was the one the funny thing is there's I did have, um I wouldn't touch Australian with a 10-foot pole.
really?
Oh, I could not do it.
Hmm.
I couldn't get it figured out. I didn't understand how they were, phrasing things. I could immediately recognize an Australian accent. I had many Australian friends,
Yeah.
but it was beyond me, and so I would avoid it at all costs. People would, "Hey, this guy should have an Australian accent," and unless it specifically said they were from Australia,
Hmm.
I wasn't I was like, "Nope, we're giving them something else."
Yeah.
And, and then I think I even turned down a book because it had some Australian and I was like, "No, I can't do that." And,
It's
I
just
mean,
like a very specific
know
thing.
your
Be like,
limits, right?
Australians, I'm out.
Well, it's not like I love Australians,
Yeah.
but, like, Australian is one of those very familiar accents that everyone knows what an Australian kinda sounds like,
Uh-huh.
so if you don't do it well, they're really gonna know, and I couldn't even do it poorly.
Yeah.
It just didn't work for me at all, and then I had a book that I was doing, and it turned out that one of the secondary characters was, a dark elf, uh, from Australia. Like, all the dark elves congregated in Australia,
Yeah.
and but the only saving grace was the fact that it took place 300 years in the future. So I thought, okay, the the Australian accent, all accents evolve and grow and change, so I
Mhm.
don't have to be as perfectly accurate in my
Yeah.
Australian accent. And I record live on Discord, most of the time when I'm doing my recording sessions, I have it streaming live. And I have a few people from Australia that hang out in there. And one of them was gracious enough to, record all of those characters' lines in their accent so that I could
Oh.
listen to what they did and try and mimic it. And even then, I
Yeah.
was, like, struggling.
Just line by line, sometimes 3 words at a time.
Right.
Oh, man. I did an audition for Wilmarth's latest, and there was this I was fine, I muscled through, I did the whole British, gatekeeper guy, but there was just one line that I could not I don't like, it wasn't even pirate, like, I was doing something with my stupid voice, but the thing is if you don't feel natural, it doesn't sound natural. So you
Right.
kinda have to relax, but I couldn't relax because then I couldn't do the voice because I needed to focus.
Yeah.
I it was like a 45-minute trap. I don't even to this day, I think I should have just, like, muted that part and be like, "Oh, sorry, audio mess up."
I well, the first go of that character, um, he had, like, I don't know, 2, 3 lines,
Yeah.
and I think it took me 3 hours to try and get it,
Really?
and
You think you could still do it?
even then I gave up and I couldn't do it. Well, since then, Um, as you put it, I took the weak man's way out, and I
Nice.
I got some coaching.
Perfect.
So, Blaze is this character, and Blaze is, a dark elf that can do anything, and he has his bow Celia, and he's really good with his bow. So, Blaze is really awesome, and he can do anything he wants to do. So, I've tried to get my Australian really, a lot better than what it was. It's
Mhm.
not really great, as far as, like, other Australians and other people that can do an Australian accent really well. It's much it needs a lot of work, but I've tried to get it to a place where it's even a little bit passable so that it has like at least I'm not completely shaming myself when I do an Australian accent.
At
So
least I'm not see, I went say that again, let me try it.
at least I'm not trying,
You almost do like an, LU sound,
at least,
at least, at
at
least,
least I'm not trying to do it really good.
and don't
So
crock on it.
I know with that,
Thanks,
I seriously
TJ.
had the screen on something
TJ
else and got
said
crock hunted.
TJ said,
Right.
"I don't know about that. I seriously had the screen on something else and thought Croc Hunter was about to go tickle a snake."
Well, and there's like in Australia, there's lots of different places and they have different accents, right? So what I'm doing is kind of like an outback, which
Yeah.
is like Steve Irwin, kind of like, oh crikey, this is really good. So like he has that kind of thing going on, but there's other Australian accents that are a little bit more they almost lean into a more British sound when they're doing
Uh,
their accent. So it's like a lot more rounded when they're talking, but it's
yeah.
like kinda got a different sound to it. So you have to try with everything like this, it's like it's just practice and practice and practice and
Uh,
trying to get it to the place where you can do it a lot better than what it was. So now that I had to try and work really hard at getting that Australian, I can do this one better than a lot of other accents
yeah.
that maybe I haven't tried as much because I put my focus into what I wasn't really good at until I tried to get it to where it was a bit better. And I would
Uh,
like to get it even better than this,
yeah.
but, that's the way you have to try and tackle anything, right? So,
So sometimes your weaknesses becomes your strength. What is South Shields? Is that a place in Australia?
yeah, I don't know. Jabez, you missed drunk off. There's, but one of the things that, uh, is one of my favorites to do is like an Irish accent.
Yeah.
Um, I had to do a lot of Irish accents in, a couple of books, and so I really had to study it again. Um, but what I found was I'm not very good at cursing. I never cursed growing up. I wasn't
Mhm.
comfortable cursing as an adult. It just was not something that I was used to. So then when I became a narrator and I had characters come up that were cursing, I was like, what am I going to do? Because you can hear when someone is not doesn't use curse words a lot and they go to swear and it sounds awkward and weird in their mouth and you're
Yeah.
like that yeah, you can tell that that person is no
It's like an 11-year-old trying
Y
it out for the first
yeah,
time.
exactly,
Poopy
and
pants.
when that character is supposed to be cussing all the time, that's that's something you have to work on to get over, so I had to work on cursing, which made me incredibly uncomfortable. However, I found that for myself, I didn't need to, um I didn't need to worry about it as much. It didn't bother me hearing someone curse in another accent.
Mhm.
Or like I could curse much more easily. So when I'm getting frustrated with something, then my Irish comes out because I'm like, oh, you fucking bastard. What the fuck is wrong with you? And so I can curse a lot more easily when I'm doing an
Yeah,
Irish accent than I can when I'm doing my regular accent. So it's like really easy to be like, yeah, this is fucking not good. So you can curse a lot more readily in some accents than others, and it just feels like it rolls off the tongue a little bit, which
mhm.
becomes a challenge because then when I'm trying to switch over to an Irish accent, usually the easiest way for me to do it is to go, "Oh, fuck, buddy," or like, "Oh, fucking bastard." That one really like it immediately I get in there and it's really
Yeah,
easy. But depending on the situation and who's asking you to do an accent, like you don't want to say you fucking bastard to start off with
yeah.
because maybe that's not really the most appropriate thing. You know what I mean?
So Byron says, "As a dumb American, I had to listen to someone for a while to tell the difference between people speaking with an English or Australian accent." So First of all, you've missed out because your name is Byron. The fact that you're not British is a complete waste. Number 2, the difference between Australian and British accent specifically is Australian is shrimp on the Barbie. British would be shrimp on someone else's Barbie.
It can be tough because there are, like I said, when you get into the upper class or the upper middle class of, Australian accents, they do tend to
Yeah,
meld a little bit more into, a British sound, and vice versa when you get into, the UK. It used to be like you would have those people with the RP accent, right? The received pronunciation, and they would have like this really, I mean, it's a much more sophisticated way of
yeah,
talking. So it was much more precise, and they would use words that were a little bit more clearly. Whereas if you get into a little bit more of like what's coming on now, you have like the ones that are like from London or whatever, and they would have that a little bit more of a glottal stop, and they would have that kind of sound coming in, but there's other ones that can come in that can be a little bit more like Australian in their little bit sound a little bit. So
yeah,
when you're doing it, it can sound a little bit more like what they would have in Australia. So it's like they're mending together. It's it's kind of it gets a little bit jumbled. And that can be hard when you have accents for especially if you're not from the UK at all
uh,
and you're trying to have different people from the UK who are from different areas, and I mean there's different places who have like different types of accents,
mhm,
so you have to try and keep them consistent, and that's what's really hard is because when you have someone who's like from Northern Ireland, or sorry, a Northern English accent when they're
yeah,
doing their stuff, and then it can sound a little bit more like you're going into a Scottish accent really quickly, right? And so then you have to switch from doing a Scottish accent to now you got to go into something that's a little bit more British, but like you just switching all the time into something completely different. It's really hard to try and get them the right way, you
yeah.
know. So you can try and do a lot of different things, but then they get really jumbled and you have to try and keep them consistent, and that can get really difficult. So
So TJ says, "Is there a certain voice or character you use? You, as a voice actor, have created that you want to use, but haven't gotten the chance to use it in a book yet."
that's a great question.
So, it to sort of side answer that, personally, um, I for some reason, the even though I'm not, I don't have a deep Southern accent, there's something fun about doing these like revolutionary, like letter. I sent you a little excerpt of like letters from the rear, and
Right.
it's fun to do those voices, and they come very natural to me because it's really just a characterization of like an extreme caricature of people that I know. Um, and I would say their names, but they don't have Facebook. So and I only insult people to their faces, so I'm not gonna. So for me, I in a weird sort of way, sometimes if you have something that seems really fun to you, I mean, I don't mind writing a short story or something like that for it. And so the background on those little letters from the rear thing was my buddy was on the toilet and decided to write a Revolutionary War letter back to his spouse. And so his letter is pretty straightforward. And then when I read it, I'm like, there's a lot of ambiguous language in that letter that I feel like I could undermine and just completely derail his character. And so I wrote another letter afterwards for the sole purpose of making his character seem insane, gaslighting, as they say. Um, but so for me, I like the, well, listen here. First of all, I have misplaced my harmonica, and I found two other harmonicals that have blood on them, and I have a monocle now. I don't even know what to do with a monocle. It's just that voice is just fun to do, and it doesn't strain. I feel like I could do that all day. Maybe on some level, that's who I was supposed to be. Maybe my real voice is a fake voice, and really I'm just, well, hello, Steve. My name's Joe.
I think that that would work for you. I think that you should consistently have that be your voice from now on. It's incredible.
Well, let's do it. I'm
So
here for it.
so this, you've been talking about this letter, and I am all for hearing you read this in your, best Southern Revolutionary War time hero.
All right. So this first letter is the letter my buddy wrote, letters from the rear, and this has a slightly. I wanted this character to be more of a sort of straightforward, sort of deeper, just sort of a deeper, more. I don't know, like Byron would have been a good name for him, but his name is Jedediah Cal Clocker Williams.
I don't know, that sounds fan-freaking-tastic.
All right, my dearest Annabelle, times are difficult. I've been out here, away from you and the girls for far too long. I miss you dearly. To cope, my mind has wandered in queer ways. I punched a cow in the head 2 days past. I had no reason other than I thought it deserved it. Maybe because it looked like your mother, or maybe because I've finally become lost to my sanity. I simply walked up to this cow and slammed that cockeyed beast square in the head. Annabelle, have you ever wondered what is harder, the bones of a human hand or the skull of a full grown steer? I don't any longer. My hand is hopelessly shattered. The cow, after my fruitless endeavor, simply looked at me, chewing its cud as it judged me. It was then I really saw your mother in that steer. I hope this letter reaches you well. Tell the girls I love them, and that punching a cow in the head, or any large animal with a skeletal system, really is not a good idea. With love, Jedediah Cow Clocker Williams. So I read that and immediately I'm like, I've got to ruin his story because I think it would be great. So I have this character, which is more my natural voice, and the hidden natural voice that I'm overcoming by talking like this. Dearest Clara, what is your recipe for pancakes? I haven't eaten in 3 days, nor have I slept in 4. We have plenty of food, but you know how picky I am. I believe I have dysentery. Bluto and I have been taking turns watching Jed. He called a willow tree a surly bovine and struck it solidly with his now useless hand. He doesn't like that tree, Clara. He's been eyeing it since we camped here Wednesday past, and it's building up in him. I told Annabelle I'd watch him, but I swear he ain't all there. He's been giving me very intimate details about his relations with Anna, and it's making things weird, seeing that she's my sister and all. He keeps calling her bosoms the girls and swears one of them is half black. I don't even know what that means. Think of me. I must evacuate. Cethery. So that was that's letters from the rear. We thought about it continuing, like a continuing thing for a while, just building up the backstory of these guys. But like every good idea, they die on the inside.
That's awesome. That's hilarious.
Let's see here. A healing tonic for your throats. Literally water. It's the only thing. Maybe a touch of honey.
Uh, it I've tried a bunch of different things. Water is absolutely hydrate, 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 hydrate.
Mhm.
Uh, but I do find some things that help. I started drinking this thing. Um, there's a bunch
If
of
you just
different
stopped
throat
right
coat
there, it
teas.
would be very good. Like I started drinking this thing, and then you just sort of glance off.
Yeah. Started drinking this thing.
Sorry, go ahead.
Uh, there's a lot of different throat coat teas or whatever
Uh,
that I've been used. There's one by this, independent tea company down in the US that I was, I was given as a gift, and I was like, "This stuff is really good."
Yeah.
Whereas most throat coat teas don't taste really good at all, and it had a lot of stuff that was really beneficial, and I liked it. But one of the things it has in it is licorice root. Now, licorice root can be good for you,
Mhm.
um, but prolonged use of licorice root, has some pretty bad side effects. I won't go into them. You can look them up if you want,
Yeah.
but they're not they're not all that great. And I was like, yeah, I might need to like tone it down with this stuff."
Yeah.
So one of the other
S
things I would drink would be hot water with a little bit of organics, apple cider, and some lemon juice, which
Mhm.
is awesome, but it smells like feet. It's not pleasant.
I don't know what feet smell like. I know what foot smells like. I'm making
Did you
notes
ever
on you
see
as
that
we go.
did you ever see that Friends episode where they're eating the tiramisu that Rachel had made, and then it's, like, got layers of, like, strawberries and whipped cream and, angel food cake and, split pea with ham and onions diced up and, like, all it and she had accidentally got the, recipe book, the pages stuck together, so she had made half tiramisu and half, like,
The
pork pot
trifle.
pie or something like this, and so but she was so excited she made something, so they're all trying to pretend that they like
Oh,
it,
yeah.
and, and so they're Ross is trying to struggle it down, and he's putting his
Uh,
mouth, and he just like, "It tastes like feet," and he just the way he squeaks in it, it was just like, "Oh, it tastes like," and I guess there's bloopers of them screwing that line up so many times,
yeah.
and Joey was like, "I like it. What's not to like? Strawberries, good. Whipped cream, good. Meat, good." He's just like but mixing them together
That's
is
fantastic.
so, yeah, that one always made me laugh. I loved that show, when it was airing. We would watch it religiously.
So you already read his "Thank You Narrator" poem. So Byron's life is complete. He has nothing else to live for. Great job, Steve. What have you done? You gotta leave them
Ruined it.
wanting more. You
I
can't just
know.
finish off people's life goals all at once like that, Steve.
There's a, uh oh, shoot. That like, when it comes to different voices and different characters and that kinda stuff, there's,
Uh,
when you were reading that, it reminds me of what we end up having these archetypes that kinda come up in our brain,
yeah.
and for some reason, sometimes it's actually written in there and you don't know until later, and you're immediately thinking, "Oh, I know exactly how this person sounds,"
Mhm.
or exactly what voice I wanna give this person, uh, and ironically enough, oftentimes it ends up being that way. I don't know if it's just because I have like, they were very clear in the way they structured the sentences or whatever, but it kinda weirds me out how often I have ended up making, the villains of a book sound like Southern plantation owners, which is very
Yeah.
similar to what you had done with that "My dearest Annabelle."
Yeah.
So, like, you have these villains who are gonna, like, try and eviscerate you with every fiber of their being, so that they can sound a little bit like they're a bit of that evangelist because
Mhm.
they're a little fanatical in what
Yeah.
they're believing, but they're already ready to tear you apart. So, like, I don't know why, but oftentimes when I have a villain that's really dastardly,
Yeah.
they slip right into that Southern, and it's not
Mhm.
I've met some very lovely Southern people who are not murderous villains, but
Well, on the
it just
whole, most
it
of us
lends
are
itself to that.
murderous villains.
And to be fair, going back in my genealogy, in my history, I can talk about them because my, forefathers were, some of the founders of the US and lived in Virginia, and so they, actually, I had 3 of my ancestors sign the Declaration of Independence.
Really?
So, yeah, I have more American in me than many Americans. It's kinda
Nice.
crazy. Francis Lightfoot Lee, Richard Lee, and, Benjamin Harrison all signed the
Okay.
Declaration of Independence, and they were all, members of like, I was related to them.
Uh,
Benjamin Harrison's sister, Sarah Harrison, married my great-great-great-great-grandfather, who was James Lee, the brother of Richard Lee and, Francis Lightfoot Lee. Now, the thing where you're gonna hate me is that James Lee was actually a loyalist and, uh, and was spying on his family, who were patriots and the founders of America.
Yeah.
Um, he was spying on them for the King George, King of England at the
Really?
time, and when they ended up he was actually, omitted or ostracized from it was really hard to find all this stuff because he was, wiped out of the family line. So if
Wow.
you go into the census records, Noah, I think his name was Noah Lee, had all of these sons, and, Richard and Francis and James were some of them, but it would name all of his sons, and then it would say at the bottom, "And there were 2 more." So his name wasn't there
Wow.
in that census, but it was like, "And there were 2 more." Like, there was 2 other ones that he had, but he's not talking to them. He's not talking about them.
If I have
And
another kid, I'm gonna name it one more and
and then
another one.
yeah, and then, but I mean, when you find out that after they lost the war, he fled to Canada and King George himself, um, granted him 3,000 acres of land in Ontario, you're like, "Okay, yeah, it's very clear what was going on here." So,
Yeah.
that's kind of interesting.
So, here we are. We're at the back end of the hour, so I wanna cycle around and give you an opportunity to tell people what you're working on. And for me personally, I've been working with Michael Head on a project that it's not me to talk about yet, but there's two projects in the works. One of them is a 3-book, and one of them is a that I may not be involved in is another 3-book deal that I'm just beyond. My experience with this community as a whole has been absolutely incredible. I mean, it's so supportive. It's so surreal to be not only able to interact with authors and narrators in such a casual and friendly way, but also to work with some of them, even if it's just to help with their Discord or to just to do things like this, where I get an opportunity to work with fully established people as a brand new narrator. It means the world to me to have your time because it's valuable to you. Normally, people have to pay $300 more an hour for you, so I'm happy to have you here to do that. And so I want to give you an opportunity to tell us if you've got anything that you're working on right now. I'd love to hear what you've got going on, and then TJ's got another question as well.
Uh, yeah, I have a lot of projects that I'm excited about, that I'm
Mm,
working on, that are coming up in the works. Um, Particularly, we wrapped up book 5 of the Dungeon Core Chronicles for Lars McMuller,
mm,
which has been a phenomenal series to work with and work on and really fun, especially because in book 1, uh, when I first started talking with Lars, he had found out or he had heard or listened to whatever it was. I can't remember specifically, but occasionally I will do like a bloopers reel at the end of an audiobook.
yeah.
And so he was like, "I want that. I want that for my book. I want the bloopers reel." I was
Mm,
like, "Okay." And I have to it's a little bit more work and setup, and I need to know beforehand if I'm doing a book that I need to make note of where the bloopers are because I do a punch and roll type of recording.
yeah.
So if I don't mark them, then they're lost. And so I was like, "Okay, I'll do that." And then there was one point where doing, um I was recording and I accidentally said a line from one character, uh, with the wrong voice, like the wrong character gave the
Oh, yeah?
line. And so then just off the cuff when I was doing that, I had the other character kind of break and be like, "What are you doing? That's my line." Like, and so I kind of had them argue back and forth a little bit, and I thought, "That's kind of fun." And
Yeah.
so I wondered if maybe it would be okay to do that, and so
100%, man. That
I asked
stuff's even better,
Lars
I would say.
if that was okay, if I did something like that for the bloopers, and he exploded with excitement, was like,
Mm,
wanted to really run with it. So he came back writing a script of different types of bloopers that he wanted to put in.
yeah.
So and this was the first time we had done anything like this, where some of the bloopers in the series are just genuine fuck ups of me making
Yeah,
mistakes all the way through, and other ones are where he's actually written something that he wants me to put in there, and then we would kind of strategically place them in amongst all the other bloopers so that it was there.
yeah.
And then on book 4, he had asked me, he's like, "I have a different idea," and I was like, "Cool, let's go with it." And so he wanted to have a talk show between two of the characters in the book that are always kind of razzing each other and giving each other a hard time. The main character,
Mhm.
Carl, and then his buddy Timothy, who's a ghost from New York. And so he had Timothy doing this. He wrote it out and he's like, "And we're back. We're talking with today with," and so we had this whole thing. I was like, "That's fun, but in order to make it clear what's going on, I think we need to add more." So I purchased, because it's the ones that you could get for free were not really great, but anyways, I purchased some laugh tracks, and I purchased some intro and outro show, like talk show
Yeah,
music. And so we have this music kind of coming in, and then I put in laugh tracks and would have them say their lines, and then I would input like little laughs here and there, so it was like the audience was laughing along like it's an actual show in the bloopers, and then it would cut into my regular bloopers, and then we had another, I think we did 3 different segments of the show, and then we would have like what's commercial breaks would be more mistakes that I actually
yeah.
made while I was recording the book. So that was a lot of fun to do that.
I accidentally did this super cool transition. I was working on the short story on DJ Bodden's website called Human. It's really deep. So this guy has an AI girlfriend, and she like 3D prints her body out so she can kind of do anything she wants. So he comes home, and he's a detective, and so he's kind of
Weird
fascinated.
science.
Yes. So he's kind of fascinated by this woman that he had just watched like jump off a building. And so the AI girlfriend is like jealous. So like mid sentence she says something along the lines of, I could download her personality. And I did this thing where I just started messing with the middle of the line, because what I wanted to happen was have her transition into a completely different voice smoothly in the middle
Mm,
of the line, and freaking nailed it. I don't have a clue what I did with the settings. I'm afraid to like mess with it or whatever. I'll send it to you when I'm done.
yeah, yeah,
It was just one of those things that and I haven't like like mastered through all this thing, but there's a little excerpt. That one line made me realize that instead of just doing an excerpt from it, I want to do the whole thing, and I'm just going to give it to DJ. If they ever want to use it, fantastic. If not, it was so fun to read. But that
that's
line,
awesome.
I messed around with the settings just a little bit, and her voice just, and a lot of times, especially if you try to mess with with the pitch of a voice, it just sounds robotic. It never works.
Mhm.
You have to figure out a way to fix it with your own voice. So
Yeah.
that was neat.
It's always challenging when you're caught with new and unusual ways to try and make things work for a different medium.
Hmm.
Um, because there's a lot of jokes, there's a lot of um ways to convey something stylistically or humorously or whatever, with the written word that doesn't work well or translate when spoken,
Yeah.
and vice versa, right? So I always, those are the times when either it's really frustrating and you're like, I don't know how to do this, or you hit this moment of like accidental inspiration and you come
Hmm.
up with a genius way of trying to make what they've done uh, on page work in audio, and it's those moments that you're like, "This is what I live for." These are the
Yeah.
moments that it's like, "Yes." But then there's other ones where you're like, "Son of a bitch, what am I gonna do with this?"
Hmm.
I had a, actually, Ryan DeBruin, great guy,
Oh my
super
gosh.
nice
Yeah.
Canadian.
Kind of pretty too.
Oh, yeah, gorgeous and tall, like, you feel like he would just hold you in his arms and you would feel safe forever.
I'm 6'4" or 4'6", depending on what leg I'm standing on. But yeah, he's up there too.
Yeah, yeah, I think he's 6'5" or
Yeah,
6'6".
he's about, he's noticeably, at a certain level, people that are taller than you freak you out. Like at 6'4", I guess I'm probably around 6'3" right now. I'm getting older and I lost ligamentation in my foot. But when you're like 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", people noticeably taller than you, you're mad at them. You're like, you're just showing off at this point. Like, I imagine it's even harder if you're like 5'5", you know, you're like all these tall people, the 6'3" guy's mad at the 6'7" guy, and here I am.
Yeah. Well, that's the funny thing, right? Like, 'cause I I grew up around a lot of tall people,
Mhm.
and so I never felt like I was particularly tall myself, right? Even like for you, you're 6'3", I'm 6'1", so I don't I'm used to being around people who are 6'3", 6'4".
Yeah.
My brothers, I'm the shortest one of my 4 brothers, and so, for me, I never felt like I was tall. But
Mhm.
then when I'm going to conventions or I'm going to hang out with people, and a lot of people aren't, 6'1" or above or
Yeah.
whatever, and then they're like, "You're so tall, you're so big," and I'm like, "I I am?" Because it's what you're
Yeah.
used to that is what the metrics of how you gauge your height or your stature.
Mhm.
And, and so it is funny when you meet someone who's like Ryan, who's so big or
Yeah.
so tall, and then you're like, "Oh, this is what other people feel like all the time. Oh, okay."
Yeah.
Because I'm used to being a certain height where you can kinda look and see everyone this way or, and
Like,
then you
I've been to war, and I only say that to preface the fact that the only panic attack I think I've ever had was, I think this guy's name was, started with a W, it was like Waylon or Wyatt or some other W name, but he showed up at my school. It was like my junior year, and I forgot something. I'm used to being literally this much taller than everybody in my school except for like 2 or 3 guys. I forgot something, and I turn around and I'm staring this guy right there. And I mean, literally, I was like fight or flight. I almost swung on him. And I mean, legitimately to this day, I remember that feeling of insignificance as I turned around. And he was up on me for a reason. He knows what he was doing.
Mm.
Wherever you are, man, you scared me, and I've never gotten over it.
And
But it's
that's
funny that that's one of the things that
yeah.
stands out in my mind as one of the times I was most scared. I just saw a tall person.
I see a tall person. It's
They make
freaking
me
me out,
nervous.
man.
So I think we got about 8 minutes left. I'm gonna try and keep it around like 1:15. Do you want to goof around on this back and forth that you sent me? I have not even read it, so forgive me if I sound like a cotton-headed ninny muggins. Forgive me for the language.
Oh my word, that was so dirty.
It was nasty.
Nasty. We can if you like. I was kinda curious to know more about how you got into
Perfect. Yeah.
narration yourself. So, I mean, like,
So my mom kept telling me, no,
my mom told me
Honey,
I had
you
a
can be
really great
anything
voice.
you want to be. I think you could just talk for a living. You're so good at it, honey.
so no,
Is that really
I
what your mom sounds like? That's
oh,
really interesting.
exactly. No, not at all.
Wow.
She grew up in Georgia, and then now lives in Kentucky. So you know, the and I mean, America is so diverse, as far as language wise, and it's pretty impressive. But um, for me, I love talking. I do public speaking. I like to talk about things that I've been through, but really just the mindset of perseverance, the mindset of pushing through. And I've caught myself being on the verge of burnout, and I knew
Mhm.
that I needed a creative outlet. I had heard people say that I've got both a face and a voice for radio, and and I could agree with at least one of those statements. So I I once I started doing the public speaking, I realized I really just enjoy talking and having fun and like stuff like this. Yeah, you and I here, like I've known you for an hour and 15 minutes basically, and it's like we're old friends. And it's I just love being vulnerable and connecting with people.
Right.
And so I think because of that, I've always gravitated towards wanting to play different parts. I did, I enjoyed improv and in drama. I've always wanted to do literally anything artistic that had to do with creativity. After I got hurt, I really liked the idea of adding things to the world. I've got a building that's literally they're outside working on it right now that I want to put a blacksmith at, like a smithy, and I want to make knives. I just want to make things that will be here when I leave. And I think
Mhm.
one of the most beautiful things that we can do with our experiences is to do things that make people happy. Okay, Byron, you're running your mouth. If you don't have a full head of hair, when I see you, I swear I'm gonna take a selfie and it's gonna go viral.
There's there's two things I wanted to say there really quick. One is while you were talking and doing that, especially when you said something like uh, there, the way you had phrased it, the way I was like, dude, you could do an incredible Howard Stern impression that no one would know any different between the two of you because you have a lot of the qualities he does. It's like if you were to even think about sounding like Howard Stern, I'm sure you would just nail it because it was right there.
Oh,
The other
nice.
thing is ironically enough, my dad makes knives for a living.
Really?
He builds knives, yeah.
That's so cool.
So, we'll have to talk more about that.
Yeah, my long-term goal is I'd love to have the money to start a nonprofit where I could
I
bring
didn't mean we need to
local.
talk about it now.
I just mean I wanna give people an opportunity to make stuff as well. So,
Yeah,
having people come in and be able to make something. I feel like for me it was a good. I got involved with nonprofits after I got hurt and everything. So, I like adding to the world. So
yeah.
I love art. I love what you do. I didn't even know I was a fan because before I got into narrating, you just didn't really think about the voices. You're just like, oh, I like that guy,
Yeah.
and but now you're like, it's funny when you go from like, what I need more books that Steve Campbell has narrated, not I need more books that this author has written.
It's an interesting thing because I was a listener before I was a narrator as well,
Yeah.
and, I realized as you said, you get deeper and deeper in, um, when you first start, and a lot of people don't go past this stage, and it's not a bad stage because we're not supposed to take center stage as narrators. We're
Mhm.
there to elevate the story and to bring the ideas and the concepts and the intention of what the author created to life in an engaging and entertaining way so that the listeners have a great experience and the author has their story getting out there in a new medium.
Yeah.
So if we're being touted or we're trying to showboat, we're detracting from that because
Yeah.
the story is the big important thing. So when you're done listening to a book, you go, "Oh wow, that was really great. Who wrote it?" Like which author was this? Or wow, I really like their writing. Not realizing that sometimes um, it's the narrator that made that book sound as good as it does.
Yeah.
I actually had a conversation with another narrator friend of mine here a little while ago, and we were talking about this very thing, and they mentioned a book series that they had read that they're like, it's okay, it's not bad. It was in a genre that they liked, but they didn't really think it was that amazing. And
Mhm.
then, but everyone that she knew around her friends were talking about how incredible it was and how great this book was, and she's like, "Really? Okay." And then one of her friends said, "Well, did you read it or did you listen to it?" She's like, "Well, I read it." And they're like, "Oh, no, no, no. You have to listen to it." And
Wow.
so she listened to the book, and then she said it opened up avenues of the writing that she never even noticed, like humor that she didn't recognize was there until she heard this person give that interpretation. And it was like, wow, now the series is one of her favorites and she's just
Yeah.
thought it was incredible. But because of the way she experienced it, she recognized that it was thanks to that narrator finding those gems or that gold in the book
Mhm.
and bringing them to life that made it that much more incredible. And for me, when I was a listener starting out, there were those people who you would listen to them and you're like, wow, wow, it's so good. And so then when you would hear something where it's like this, I know this book is good, and then you would hear a narrator do it, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
that's where I had that mantra where for me as a narrator, I want to make a bad book good, a good book great, and a great book excellent. I
Yeah.
always want to be elevating the story
Mhm.
because if you're not doing that, what are you doing the book at all? You know what I mean? So that's I mean, sometimes that can be intimidating, and I get like anxiety, and I'm like, I can't even do this because I want to do such a good job with this book, and so it freaks you out and you can get in your head, but at the same time it's that care and intention with being able to narrate it in a way that elevates the story that
Yeah.
makes the thing. And I'm going on and on, but I'll say this one thing and then I'll shut up. There was um when I was starting out, of course, the first books you do, you're like taking whatever you can.
Yeah.
And but there was one of the books that I had done early on that actually started gaining traction and really getting noticed, was under a pseudonym. And I felt like I thought the book was great. I thought it was really really good, and I was proud of what the author had done. And so when the reviews started coming in, and there were more than like the 5 that I had gotten in total from the other
Hmm.
books I'd done, I felt bad because on Audible they have like overall rating that you can give it, and then they have the 2 options behind that, which is performance and story.
Yeah.
And this one consistently, the overall ratings, not each individual one necessarily, but overall, all the ratings showed that my performance was outranking the story. And I felt bad because I was like,
Yeah.
oh man, here I am showboating, which is not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to
Hmm.
enhance the story, and I'm drawing the limelight because a lot of the reviews were coming in saying that the narrator is great, blah blah blah. And I felt so bad. I messaged the author and I says, "I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to, you know." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, I don't want to, you know, like I feel bad that it seems like I'm showing up your story or I'm making it, you know, about me." And he's like,
Yeah.
Listen, you're you're stupid." And I'm like, what?" He
My
said,
wife's been saying that for years, but
"Yeah.
you're the first guy that's told me.
I know. Thanks a lot. Confirming everything my wife has told me for so long." Um, he said, "What would it be like if the roles were reversed and my story was really highly rated, but your performance was really lowly rated?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." He says, "You would have been detracting from my story. You would have it clearly that shows that your performance was taking away from my story and it wasn't as good. The
Mhm.
fact that you're showing that your performance has elevated the story means that you're doing good. This is not something you should be apologizing for. This is a bragging point for you."
Yeah.
And when I was like, "Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that makes sense. I am stupid." What And so now I'm very grateful and pleased at the fact that all the books that I've done, it's been a while since I've really checked, so maybe I should, but so far as I know, all the books that I've done, um, if you look at the overall performance rating and the story rating for every one of them, if they're not tied evenly at whatever the rating is, you
Yeah.
know, 5 stars or 4.5 or whatever it is, if they're not tied, my performance always outranks the story, which means that consistently I've been able to elevate the story all the way through. And
Well,
I was like, that's such a relief and like, thank goodness.
so much of communication is in tone. And so sometimes writing as a book, you cannot write something that dictates exactly what you want people to hear. My example of that would be, Neil Gaiman. I read American Gods, thought it was a fantastic book, loved it. But boy, when I listened to the all cast version, the guy who does Shadow's voice, I'm awful. I can't remember his name right now. That dude shivers my timbers.
Mm.
I'm telling you, that guy could just whisper anything in my ear. He could say, moist mouth, and I mean, I'd just go right to sleep. I don't know. I mean, it was just incredible. So sometimes you have people, that are really good at taking a good story and performing it the way that that story needed to be performed in order
Right.
to bring life to those characters.
Right.
And
Yeah,
and
exactly.
so we got TJ here that says, I find so much more enjoyment in audiobooks due to y'all. Y'all, I like that. I like a good
Y'all,
y'all as
y'all as
well.
well.
And Jay says, it's the narrators like you guys that give us the extra. We love you for giving voice to our stories. Send me your PayPal. I will send you guys money. And so thank you, Jay, for that. Absolutely. Steve, it's been incredible. I literally could do this for another hour and a half. I mean, 100%. We could go on and on, but I feel like we've already pushed the limits of our welcome here. It's like, 9 o'clock at night after dinner, and you're just sitting there trying to think of ways to get people to go home. So
Yeah.
we don't want to overstay our welcome. We want to leave them wanting more, or at least slightly less, and not a lot less. So
Steve has earned his share of my
he
money.
has to earn his share.
There's before we go, I just wanted to kind of finish up with we were talking and I derailed us again and again. We were talking about
It's two
you
ADD people talking. It's absolutely going to happen.
100%. We were talking about you getting into the industry and you like, I wanted a new avenue, a new creative
Mhm.
venture. But then how did you, because I tried to look, as far as I know, you don't have anything quite published yet. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Or, okay,
That
so,
is correct. So I have things that are starting this summer. The
right.
3 book series that should be starting next month. That I've done a fair amount of background work on. But my personal history has been in public speaking
Yeah,
and doing. I've done loads of podcasts and things like that. Not that
right.
those things translate directly in, but I have went all in. I have taken classes. I made jokes earlier, but and that's why I was so honored to be paired with you, because I feel like it's a great idea to have somebody who's experienced, who knows what they're doing. Paired with a young buck like me who's
Oh, wait,
who's
I'm the one that's supposed to know what I'm doing in this scenario? What?
unfortunately at
Uh,
my level, everybody knows what they're doing. But
and
so
and so
I
then how
that's
did you
why I
get
was.
this 3-book series? Where did that come about?
I had a guy one time when I was doing an interview ask me a question that almost hurt my feelings. And he said to me, it's the weirdest question I've ever been asked. He said, "Do you feel like your personality has taken you farther than an education would have?"
Hmm.
And in a weird sort of way, I thought that initially that sounds like a statement of saying, you've sort of tricked people into liking you, and that's where your opportunities come from. But then I started really thinking about that statement, and I realized that my connection with people is real, it's raw, and so when I say something to you, I mean it. And so much of the my opportunities have come from personal interactions I've had with people. And so just like with Michael Head, he's a injured military as well. And military guys gravitate to one another much the same way authors do, or dog people who lick their dogs in the mouth. They just
Shared
people like that
experiences,
tend
yeah.
to find other people like that. And so I've given him multiple ways out. He knows that he's taking a risk with a new narrator, but he's all in, and he's so supportive, and he's been fantastic. And so I've got some a fair amount of samples and things like that, but until I have something under my belt, um you're the guy who knows what he's doing here.
It's funny that you talk like when you said that about the person asking whether it was your education or your personality that's taken you far. Um, I kind of I can see how you would feel like maybe that seemed like it was an insult or the potential for that, but I that was not the impression I got from it immediately, probably based on my own experiences with that type of thing because my background was um, after I graduated high school, I didn't know I won't even get into it, but I spent 20 years in construction. I didn't have any kind of other education aside from high school.
Yeah.
And so coming from construction to narration, that's a that's a huge
Yeah.
jump. Like there's a pretty big schism there.
That's an
And
ADD jump.
yeah. And and so even when I was in construction, what was always re there was a lot of scenarios or instances where um it it was they were meaning to they were meaning it as a compliment, but it was coming across it had the very easy way of coming across as very insulting. I was doing a job for a guy. It was his own house in his basement. He was renovating it, and I was coming into to the drywall and taping. And it was the first time really spending any time with him was when I was starting the job and I was working, and he came down to kind of talk to me a little bit, and then he just continued to stay there for 3 hours, literally following me around as I went room to room working, and he just followed me and talked with me. And that's a little odd, but
Yeah.
I like talking,
Hmm.
and I didn't mind, and he said, he said, I don't mean to be offensive, I don't mean this to be rude or whatever," and I'm like, "Well, maybe you shouldn't say it because it sounds like it's gonna be."
Yeah.
But
You've over prefaced.
yeah, So I kind of was like, okay. And he says, okay, so when I was in school, I don't mean this to be rude, and he was really hesitant. He's like, when I was in school, the people who couldn't hack it in school, the ones who weren't smart enough to really make it through, always went to trade school. And this guy was an engineer, and he said, I gotta say, like, I've spent some time with you, and you're kind of flipping things around for me in my head, because after 3 hours of talking to you, you're like really smart. And I was like, "Oh, okay." And he said, "Yeah, like, I'm not expecting that. Like, I would think that somebody who was doing trades or whatever, usually," like, he says, "I don't mean to be rude, but they're kinda dumb, and they don't have, like, the ability to be intelligent or whatever." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Okay, yeah, that's kind of rude, but also kind of true. I've met a lot of them." But um, the fact that he was like, "You're just kind of blowing me away with this," and I had multiple other scenarios where teachers I'd be working doing jobs on, and they're like, "Why are you in construction? You're way too smart for this." And I was like, "Why do people think that this is
Yeah.
that being in construction means that you have to be dumb, and that it's such a disservice to the people who work with
Mhm.
their hands and have the understanding?" And I could give you story after story after story of instances where the educated engineers and architects and whatever would be like, "This is where we're gonna do it." And it's like the people who are on the ground actually doing the work would be like, "That's not possible. What
Yeah.
you're wanting there will not work in the real world." But I built it on my computer, and I have these blueprints that show, and it's like, that means nothing to the
Yeah.
actual practical application. So there's a lot of times, even with people who may not have like book smarts, that they have an intelligence or an intuition and an intuitiveness to be so much more successful than people who had like a classical book education. And I'm not trying to say that if you got a degree or you went to college, you went to university, that you're an idiot, because that's not the case. But having a slip of paper, and this is, I feel like, is becoming more and more known in our society, that going to university or going and getting an education doesn't mean that you're better or that you're smarter or
Yeah.
that you have everything that it takes, compared to someone who maybe only had a high school education, or maybe is working as a janitor or a tradesperson. Those people can be incredibly intelligent and
Mhm.
sophisticated, and have knowledge that will be so much more practical and important if either things turn to shit in the whole world, or the ability to understand or intuit things that aren't necessarily covered in book world.
Yeah.
I had expressed interest in 3D art for a little bit, and I was actually talking with a guy who I found out later actually produced 3D animated shows. And he was telling me, he says, if I have two candidates in front of me, and one got graduated from design school with honors, and the other one uh, learned everything he did on his computer at home in his basement, and they show me their work and it's identical, I will take the guy who learned in his basement over the guy who graduated with honors every single time. And he said the reason is because the guy who went to school, they knew how to do the right things because the teacher said, you do this, you do this, you do this, and it gives you this. And so he learned how to do everything right, but he learned how to do it because people showed him exactly where to go and what to do.
Yeah.
The guy who did it in his basement, he learned 500 ways to do it wrong before he
Mhm.
eventually figured out the way that makes it look right. And so that has made it so that he has problem solving skills. He knows how to work around a situation, and he has a so much better and broader scope of the software that he's using, because he had to search through a lot of stuff to get to where he wanted it to be. So now he has all that back knowledge that if something else comes up, he can go, well, when I did this over this, that created this effect, and I
Yeah.
can use that to do this over here. And so it makes it much more valuable
Mhm.
as a person who is more rounded and has the ability to do that. Whereas if this other person encounters a problem that doesn't conform to the ABCD platform that he learned in school, he's lost, he's screwed.
Yeah.
Unless now, there are those people who take those education things and they went to school and they learn on their own and they broaden themselves.
Yeah.
And that's great. And not to take away from those, but on the whole, when you have the two of them, that's what is more valuable.
You have some people with gaps. I'm one of those people. I do not know how to market myself. It's hard for me to say, hey, listen to this. It's incredible. But over the course of the past 12 years of me doing public speaking, I can finally admit that I do have an effect on people. I can interact with people in that format. And if I knew how to market myself, I could probably be getting paid buku bucks doing just public speaking. But I don't know how to tell. So I've been doing it for free for so long for nonprofits that I don't know how to say, hey, you want me to come speak to your business or whatever? It's going to cost you, $8,000 for me to come out there and do that.
Right.
And those numbers sound crazy, but the people that are looking for speakers to come to their business, they've got, $200,000 budgeted towards this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And and it's just, for me, that's been my issue with a lot of things. I know that I need to pair myself with people that are smarter than me. I'm a strong second. At no point would I ever want to start my own audio or narration or publishing company. I would love to be involved in someone else's work to help them succeed. But my ambition level stops at like COO, not I don't want to be, I would never want to be president or even vice president. Secretary of the Navy might be all right.
And I mean, Byram touches on an incredible point with that learning to value yourself is hard.
Mhm.
And it's something that you have to figure out how to fight for. And I think I attribute a lot of my success in narration, especially my early success, in the fact that I learned so much in the construction industry
Mhm.
that directly translates to the audio industry. I mean, you have general contractors and you have homeowners
Yeah.
in construction, and especially residential construction. And that is like general contractors are like publishers. And you have the big general contractors and the big five publishers, and you have those small boutique independent contractors, and you have the independent publishers. And then you have the
Yeah.
homeowners, which are sort of like authors. And at all given points, I had worked with every one of them on the construction side, and then going into the narration side, I was dealing with the same thing. And because
Mhm.
I understood how to communicate with each one of those and the kind of the underlying pinning things of the themes of interacting with people, it didn't matter that the industries are so completely different in their
Yeah.
practical application and in the field. The way to interact with people and the way to learn how to present yourself and how to relate to people and what's important when it comes to customer service or when it comes to understanding a client's or a customer's needs, and all of that stuff was so familiar to me that when I came into narration, I was already hitting the ground running with that stuff, that now I just needed to make sure that I was okay at recording a book,
Yeah.
So that's it. It is something where you can take all of the experiences that you have, like you have with your time in the military and, your time recovering from such a grievous industry or injury and and all of the things that you've learned along the way, and then compile it to try something new or try something different. We never know how something that seems like it could be a complete waste of time becomes such a valuable part of our lives. When
Yeah.
I was a kid, I loved acting. I loved doing dramas, and I was in plays all the time. But I never actually seriously thought that I would ever be able to go to Hollywood and become an
Yeah.
actor. Like, I was like, I'm too practical for that. I'm a tiny, it seems like I'm a big fish in a tiny pond, but um, then you go to a larger pond and you're like, oh, I'm a guppy. This is not going to happen. And
Yeah.
I was too practical for that, but I loved it. And yet I let that side of myself go because I was like, there's nothing ever going to happen with that. And now all of a sudden, all those things that I used to love um, have kind of come back full circle. And so I try and tell my boys, I have a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old, and I'm always talking to them about, they're like, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to try that. And I'm like, look, you don't have to, even with food, right? Try it. Well, I don't want to. I'm not going
Yeah.
to like it. Just try it. And it's like, you don't have to like it but you need to try it.
Steamed dumplings.
Yeah, steamed dumpling.
Hmm.
So if you live your life with the openness to be like, I don't care if I fail at this,
Mhm.
I'm just want to try it and see what it's like. And you try a whole bunch of things and you try a whole bunch of avenues and you start pursuing what interests you and all of a sudden all the little things that didn't seem like they would amount to much turns into something amazing and great
Yeah.
that you're able to use for a career that you never would have known was even a possibility. I didn't know that narration was even a job uh, until I was listening to audiobooks and I started going, wait, people get paid to do this?
Yeah.
How does that work? Google.
Mhm.
And that was what started me on the journey to becoming a narrator. So, like being open, I think is the most important thing.
And that's a beautiful mindset of being able to seek your own failures. Because, for instance, if I send you a snippet, I love talking to people that say you need to work on your S's. You're out of control with that. But to give me, I'm not
Mm,
looking for you to tell me, hey, great job, that was beautiful. I want that, and to be able to be in a mindset of looking for your weaknesses to shore them up is great. And so going into that mindset of managing expectations, not just between customers or whatever that background that you did in construction, but being able to also know yourself and know what you're capable of getting done in a certain time frame, I think is one of those things that, like you mentioned, is what helped transition you. I'm we're at an hour 35, so
oh,
I
well, I mean, now that we're at an hour 35, we
we
need to
have to
like
do two, right?
you have to go to full 2. I mean, what else are you gonna do? It's a weird transition if we don't.
Yeah, you can't hit 100. It's gonna look weird if it goes to like 138 or something like that.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
but
Um, no, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, but on my end of this, I am constantly seeking that improvement. I can listen to some of the things that I recorded even 2 months ago and go, wow, like a was that like a timing take just to see how long something was going to take? Like, what was that? And then I'm like, no, I went through and like got rid of background noise on that and everything. Like, ugh, I added filters. That's filtered. Ugh.
Mm,
Like, I mean, the improvement is just gargantuan with time. Just even week to week sometimes when you first
yeah.
start out, the hardest transition for me being the software and learning to enunciate and not because Americans, like you said, we're lazy speakers. And so I tend to run my words together and I speak fast. Part of that was I when I was younger, my favorite friends were books, and so I would use words and things like that. So in a weird sort of way, I built bad conversational habits to dumb myself down.
Hmm.
I didn't want to be, playing football and being like, actually, I mean, I really did sort of develop almost an accent of sorts that I didn't naturally have in order to assimilate. And
Really?
oh, it's so for me, Byron, the female voices, my problem is that I found is that there's a deeper bass on like the front end of my voice that if I just do a soft voice, because you can't just do like falsetto, you can't be like, "Hello, my name's Susie." You can't always. It doesn't sound like you can't do a romantic scene with that voice. You almost have to do
We
like a
you
husky.
can.
Well, you can if you're Harmon Cooper. Um, but no, it, for me, sitting in your falsetto, it's hard for me to feel natural. So doing the softer voice, the problem is for me is that if I listen with bassy headphones afterwards, it I still there's always that undertone even when it's a softer voice. So like when I was doing earlier when I was like um I could download her personality. Like even that, you have to be careful to be more subtle and not try to just talk like a girl. Really, you just soften the voice a little bit on my end. You may have a different method that's way more developed than mine. Your ability to switch between accents, even going from like for me, I need like a 2-minute mind cleanse in order to switch accents. It's and I do hope that that gets easier for me as it comes because otherwise. My
It does, it will,
good.
because I mean, there's lots of things I still struggle with, and the the funny thing is that what I learned about doing, uh, female characters when you're a guy, um, is that we like you had just like you had just given an example of, and then even with your Byron, with your question about, a voice that's, out of your natural octave, generally the misconception is that guys are way down here and girls are way up here.
Yeah,
That's not the reality of the situation. There's a lot of women who sometimes have a much deeper voice than some guys do, right?
yeah,
And so the assumption that changing your octave or changing like the higher tones and the lower tones of your voice is going to make it male and female is a misnomer. um, and so what you have to think about when it comes to switching from male to female, a lot of it has to do with attitude and personality. And instead of thinking, I need to sound like a girl, you need to think about, I need to sound like Cindy. And
mhm,
who is Cindy? And what kind of person is she? You know? And so then when you start thinking about the character itself and not just, I need to do this voice, you can make what you can make that character come alive. Because as narrators, this is the great challenge. And this is the thing where we work together with the listener. um, the listener's in on the trick. They're in on the lie that this is all being done. We're not multicasting this. There are multicast books. That's different. This is
yeah,
when you're dealing with a solo narrator. They know that it's one person doing all the voices. You're not going to trick them and make them believe that, oh, they didn't. Now, there
yeah,
are times when I've had people go, oh, wow, I forgot that this was one person. I felt like this was a
mhm,
multicast at different times because you can have some more vocal dexterity or whatever. But if you're trying to make them sound so completely different than you all the time, it can get a little bit overwhelming and daunting and become a bit more ridiculous.
yeah,
So when you're thinking about a guy or a girl, and this is one aspect, there's so many difference because we're all individuals and we're all real. And as soon as we try and caricaturize anybody, it's going to come across as a caricature and not a real person. So, for example, if I was to do something like, um, what's wrong with you? Nothing's wrong with me. I can tell something's wrong with you. No, there's nothing wrong with me. Why are you even bugging me about this? I just know that something's going on. Will you just let me know what's happening? Nothing is happening. Why are you giving me such a hard time about this? I just want to be a part of your life. Just let me be a part of you. Look, leave me alone. I'm fine. If you just let it go, it wouldn't be an issue. I don't understand why you won't just let me in. Now, I haven't done anything majorly different with my voice,
mhm,
but because of the intention and the way I'm dealing with those characters, you can tell which is which. So that's where you change it up so that you're not dealing with, I need to have this person be way up here and this person
yeah,
be way down here, right? So that I've had books where I thought, you know what, this female character needs to sound like they have a deeper voice than the
yeah,
male character. So you can have like a guy that's like, oh my gosh, this is really amazing. Hey, it's wonderful to see you. How are you doing? So now you have this woman who has a lower register than the guy, but you can still tell that she's a woman.
yeah,
And so it comes along with, depending on who the character is and how they act, you can make them sound a lot different without doing much with your voice. So that's generally how I look at it is,
yeah,
who is this person? What are their motivations and how do they act? And you'll have sometimes where those caricatures or those archetypes are very common. Oh my God, this is so amazing. I just can't believe it. Oh, it's so wonderful to meet you. I just can't wait till we get to go together. And it's going to be so much fun. And we're going to have so much fun over here and doing this. And if we go shopping, we'll be able to get lattes later on. It'll be incredible. Don't you think? So you can be a little bit more ridiculous depending on how it works.
yeah.
But it's
Especially if
all,
it's a one-off, if you've
yeah.
got a character that's just sitting in this one scene and they're not coming back, you can kinda have fun with it depending on what it is.
Yeah. And so you like it's narrator, it's like, sorry, not narrator, but it's character specific.
Mhm,
And you need to make sure that like even you can run the danger, and this is where an understanding of the industry and an understanding of audiobook narration in general can help you understand that you might have a character who has like, oh my gosh, this is really awesome. I just can't wait for this to be so much the way it's going to be. All right. So you can have a character that kind of has that annoying, weird sound, and it's funny and it's interesting. But if that's your main character, you're screwed. Right. So
Yeah.
you, even a secondary character that has a lot of lines, you don't want that because it's too grating. So
Mhm.
you need to save those for like the little one-offs where it's like a couple of lines and people are like, yeah, that's fun.
Like,
Yeah, that's okay.
Hello, honey. Now listen. If you're
Yeah,
gonna drink all my licorice root tea, you're gonna have to replace it.
exactly. Exactly.
you have a licorice root tea problem. Is that what it was earlier?
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem.
I
I was
like
able to stop
anything
drinking it, but
I like anything that says long-term effects may include.
yeah, yeah. Oh, I've been drinking 3 cups of this a day. That's probably gonna be long-term effect-ish. Okay.
It's created diamonds in my ears. I don't know exactly what's happening.
So, yeah, when it comes to like anything else, if we start looking at women as like, oh, girls are up here and guys are down here, or if we're like jocks are sound this way and guys sound this, like as soon as you just immediately assume all of that all the way through on everything, it's going to become very one note.
Yeah,
But if you think about these characters and try and create a personality behind them, and some authors make this so incredibly easy with the way they write and their skill and their talent at being able to write characters who seem different by the way they talk, the
mhm,
vernacular they use, the idioms, it it matches. I had one author who used the line "a difference without distinction," and that's, I mean, it's an interesting way of saying there's no difference there, really, a difference without distinction. But it's not a very common phrase. And I
yeah,
mentioned this to him, and he's like, "Oh, well, lawyers use it all the time." And I said, "Okay, but you have 4 different characters in this book all use that same line, and one of them's a janitor. Not many janitors would say that's a difference without distinction. Like, it's just you need to be careful to know who these characters are and how they would speak, and so that they don't all sound exactly like the same person, because if they all sound exactly the same in the way they talk and the phrasing that they use, it makes it that much harder as narrators, and even for someone reading, potentially,
yeah,
to really care about these characters as someone individual and unique and different. So we can work with that by doing a little bit of vocal gymnastics to make something improve, and hopefully one does. But the easier it is for you as a narrator to go, I immediately know who that character is. And it happens, right? Like
yeah,
I've had characters where it's like, oh my gosh, this is really amazing. And I can't wait for you to find out exactly what's going to happen. And you know exactly what that person is going to sound like because
uh-huh.
this is exactly the way they were written. And so you're like, exactly how it's going to go. So you can immediately hear how a person sounds by the way they were written. So yeah.
An example that I like is, whenever there's a mage book or whatever, there's always the one cliche character that shows up who's like from a noble family and they talk down to everyone. They're like, "Oh, I can't believe you believe that fire would be an element that the nobles would use. We use ash," or something like
Yeah.
that. And to be able to, what's fun though is when you have those cliche characters and you hear people that can take two or three of those people, because sometimes if you have a caricature of a concept in your mind, it's hard to differentiate between the two. So one trick that I've personally have had to use is either it's hand motions in order to lock a character in for certain things, or like facial contortions, like
Yep.
you talk out the side of your mouth in order to do a bit of a whatever, and then the other character, um, may be more like a lower whisper, but yeah, I mean, you have people that are pros at it, like Andrea
Mhm.
Parsnow, and that can make multiple characters. That her male characters are insane. I
Oh,
mean,
she's
really,
incredible.
she
I
has more
adore
voices, I
Audrea.
think, than anyone.
She really does,
Yeah.
especially with The Wandering Inn, and she's worked
Oh
very, very
man.
hard. Like,
Yeah.
I think she's north of 400 characters
Oh my
in that
gosh. Yeah.
series, and it can get when you're dealing with some of these epic large, like especially web serials, um, having to kind of figure out how to do all of these voices and all of these characters and create different ones is a real challenge.
Mhm.
Um, and so like I had one of the things that you'll struggle with is or at least I did, was when you have a situation. Sometimes it's easier when you have creatures that you have to give voice to, as opposed to just a book full of humans,
Yeah.
because then it allows you to go into other extremes with it. But then you'll have like, okay, we have goblins here. Okay, so what does a goblin sound like?
Okay, so a goblin for me would be like,
Oh, I'm gonna eat that. That's mine.
but if you were just gonna do,
Yeah. Okay.
but then you have to do like 4 more goblins.
Right.
And
And
so
then
then
go
oh,
ahead.
so you're the
Were you
one
going to
like,
give an example?
Well, are you gonna eat all of that, or can I share some of it?
so now let me try and do a female goblin.
Hmm.
Oh, listen up, boys. If you're not gonna eat all of it, I'm gonna eat all of yours and all of mine.
Hmm.
But yeah, I have to sort of like do,
Yeah.
do
And it's
this.
very, but it's, you're right. Like we have to, like you're still acting. So
Yeah.
using your whole body really helps with that.
Mhm.
But then also, and you did, those great, by the way. But now you have, so you have four different goblins that you're all having to figure out how to do. And now we have hobgoblins. So how do you differentiate between a goblin and a hobgoblin? And then we have ogres and
Yeah, I was about to
orcs
say I could
and
probably do a hobgoblin, but then if you had orcs right after that, I'd have to do something crazy with the orc because I probably used my orc voice for the
mhm.
hobgoblins because I'm like, you go from
Oh, listen here to oh, listen here.
and then with the orc you have to be like, oh, listen here. You just can. I don't
You
know.
almost had like that, "My name is Optimus Prime," with that last, "Oh,
I'm not
listen
even gonna
here."
try. God rest his soul. I'm just gonna leave that one
Mm.
alone.
Yeah, man, he's just incredible the way
Yeah.
I've heard him do interviews where he talks about how he came up with Optimus Prime, and it was really, really awesome.
Mhm.
Very, very cool. It literally brought a tear to my eye.
Yeah.
If you haven't heard the story, check it out on YouTube. It's really cool.
I will. I haven't
But
seen it.
but, yeah, it is one of those things where you have to try and come up with all that stuff, and then you come up with, "Okay, this creature's gonna sound like this," and that works for one creature, but
Mhm.
now you have a whole race of them that are introduced, and you're like, "I have to make that voice, but now I have to bring distinction to each one of those characters in that."
Yeah.
And being like, how do I manage that? How do I do this? And so, sometimes it helps. That's why I still consistently listen to audiobooks. Um, there's differences in how I listen to audiobooks now than what I used to, but
Mhm.
you're always checking out different narrators or different people to see, well, what are they doing with this? How are they handling this? And do I like it? Is it well
Yeah.
received? A lot of I read loads and loads and loads of reviews, not just of the books that I've worked on. So I have a gauge of what, like, I mean, you'll have one-offs, you'll have stuff that's like completely subjective. Like I had a couple of reviews that came up where it was, you know, the one review literally said, why the hell did he make this character sound like he's 43 years old? He's a 17-year-old. He made him sound 43. That's stupid. The very next review, why the hell did the narrator make the main character sound like he's
Mhm.
12 years old? He's a 17-year-old character. It sounds stupid. Like that kind of thing where it's subjective. You don't know.
Yeah.
So you have to try and, if you're ever going to read your reviews, one, you have to have a thick skin, and two, you have to take some of them as like outliers or a grain of salt. But if you have like consistently everyone going, yeah, he sounds really weird, something with his accent, and he says things weird, makes you go, okay, well, maybe I need to work on my Canadian
Yeah.
accent. Or, you know, I love all of the stuff he does, but everything sounds nasal. Okay, well, what can we do about that? Now, if it's only one off or a couple, compared to, like, you have to gauge how many of those are coming through, because you could get really bogged down and you'll never please everyone. So the second you start trying, you're going to please no one. But being able to see not only what reviews come in for myself, but read reviews of books that I've listened to and what I liked and didn't like, and how
Mhm.
is that being handled or enjoyed by the listener base, especially in lit RPG, where there's such a dedicated listener base that has very strong opinions about things, and then you can avoid certain pitfalls or traps that other narrators may have fallen into,
Yeah.
that you want to kind of get away from, or things that people say, I love this, or I love this, or I love this, and you're hearing that consistently from the audiobook world. You can go, okay, that's something that I need to include in my repertoire, my toolbox of abilities that I have, so that when I'm narrating this, I'm giving the audience uh, as much as I can of myself to the best of my ability, so that they get the enjoyable experience. Because really, we're doing this so that listeners love these stories and want more. And so I know a lot of narrators, not necessarily in lit RPG, but a lot of narrators are like, I don't care what the listeners think. I don't care. I'm doing my own thing. I'm the
Yeah.
artist. I'm the creator. I need to do what's best for me and what fulfills me creatively. And that's not a terrible thing to be like, I'm doing what I love the way I love it.
Hmm.
But if it's to the detriment of, this is still a business, right? And so if you're doing something that's to the detriment of the author and the success of his book, because the listeners aren't enjoying what you're doing, then you need to check yourself, right? You need to
Yeah.
go, okay, this is still a business. I'm still in this to make it so that your art, if you want to call it that, your art is appealing to a larger audience. If you don't care about that and you just want to create your own art and do your own thing, make sure you let your authors know that that's what you're doing, because
Yeah.
maybe they're all in for that and that's cool. But if not, then you're not the only person here. If you're narrating your own books and you want to do your own thing, go right ahead, do that, and it
Yeah.
works for you.
Well, you're gonna have some people that will hear a character and they're like, "Can you make them like 5 years older?" And you're like, "What does that sound like?" So we have two good questions here. I think it's probably a good way to cycle back around. Geneva's question, I think, is going to have a little more meat to it. So I wanted to actually touch on Byron's first because I feel like it's going to be different for everybody. But for me, based off of feedback I've gotten from public speaking versus many other things, a lot of times I remember the argument from authority concept. How many of these people have had your experiences? Do they know what you're supposed to sound like when you do these things? And especially as a narrator, as someone who does this, you're going to be more critical of yourself than anyone. I
Mhm.
mean, I can hear something and somebody can say, "Wow, that was like you even just complimented my little goblin voices right there. They sounded so dumb to me." But sometimes if you can record something and step away and come back, you're like, "Okay, that was objectively pretty good." But in that moment you're like, "Ah, I just, I wasn't feeling it." You're doing this with your hands.
Mhm.
Um and so I think the mindset of just you give people a certain power over you when you open your mind up to those reviews, and I think that remembering that everyone has different wants and needs, like you mentioned earlier. Everybody is looking for something different. You're going to have somebody that's mad that your girl voice doesn't sound like,
Oh, hello, Susie.
and you're going to have somebody else that wants likes a more husky, like, hello, wants something
Mhm.
like that, and they're not going to like anything other than that. So,
Right.
I'm sure you've got a better answer than that. But I think on my end, I think it's just easier to try to focus on realizing that you're never going to make everybody happy.
Yeah. So some of the things that you can do to avoid review fatigue, um, one is, like, part of it is a little bit weird because I've, not to say that I don't have my fair share of negative reviews. I do. Maybe I shouldn't say I don't have my fair share. I don't have my fair share of negative reviews, and I think that's part of the thing. Like,
Mhm.
I was so self-critical and so harsh on myself that when I was, especially at the early stages, um, I would literally, in order to be able to have the confidence and ability to come into the booth and keep going, I would have to go and read the new reviews that were coming in on the books I was working on, because they were always better than
Yeah.
what I was thinking in my own head.
Hmm.
And so I was very fortunate early on to have largely very positive reviews on my narration.
Yeah.
So that was helpful. And yeah, it was sometimes devastating when I would have a review that would make a comment that hit home to an insecurity of my own
Yeah.
about my narration. And they would be like, he sounds really nasal. And I'm like, oh man, I do sound nasal. Oh,
My life sucks. I'm
I'm
so bad
horrible.
at this.
I need to stop right now. Everyone else that has told me I don't is a liar.
My
This
wife should
person,
hit me
this
more.
stranger knows the truth. So yeah, if you can't disassociate with that kind of stuff, what you have to do is what some people that I know have done very smartly is they have someone that goes and reads reviews for them and filters. Then they come back to
Oh,
you with either,
Say
hey,
that.
this is a common thing that comes up. Hi, Nathan. It's awesome to see you. Then
oh,
they kind of come up. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, quick background on Nathan. He's not actually human. He's actually a Bigfoot that Darla shaves to take him out in public. Didn't know if you knew that. This is kind of a side note. Go ahead. Sorry,
I
Steve.
didn't know about the shaving, but
Mhm.
he was a bit whiskery when we made out last year. So
Yeah,
that kind of makes sense.
yeah, but his enthusiasm makes up for it.
Yeah, very dexterous tongue work, I gotta say. Um, so what you do is then you have them kind of theme through and go, okay, there's some stuff in there that that you need to pay attention to because there's some common themes. Or if something's really, really positive, you can just send it on through, and then you get all the good stuff and all the things that's encouraging, and they can filter out what's not going to be great later on. Do you know what I mean? So
Absolutely, yeah.
those are
I
some
like
of the
that
things
idea.
you
I
can
think
do.
that I will
It's
do
not
that,
bad.
especially early on.
Hmm.
You know, especially considering, I mean, Michael Head has had Travis Balltree, like, and here I come trying to do my thing behind somebody like a literal Hall of Famer, you know. Um, and but
Did he
to
make it into
me,
the Hall of Fame?
I don't know. He's just, I mean, it's inevitable. Let's just let him have it for
Well,
now.
granted,
Yeah.
I missed the announcement if he did because I
I
was
don't know. I think that it was either announced or it has already happened. I could be
hmm.
way, way
Yeah,
off.
I don't know. I don't know. I do know that Audio File Magazine and the Audio Publishers Association, they actually have an audiobook Hall of Fame
Yeah.
uh thing. So I didn't know if Travis had been inducted or not. Um,
Um,
but it
and
is go ahead.
no, if you finish what you were saying, because I was going to move on to Geneva's question because we are at the 2 hour mark now.
Now we have to go to 3. Shit. Um,
I don't think we're ever going to be able to stop on the nose.
uh, okay, go ahead. Go ahead with with Geneva's question.
All right. Do your best Geneva impression. Go ahead. You want to read this one?
Oh gosh, and Geneva's voice.
Yeah.
Ugh, I'm horrible at impressions, I'll have you know.
Well, that all my characters come from bad impressions. Everybody that I do is actually me trying to do someone else, and it sounds nothing like them, so it's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, the only ones that I kinda get away with is I did, Canadian SpongeBob for a character one
Oh,
time,
nice.
and
Do your
then
Canadian SpongeBob then for this,
okay.
if you can.
Uh, question for you guys. A lot of narrators will come with characters after other will name characters after other authors slash friends. What do you know? If you know that, do you try to make them sound like the person being referenced, or do you just go to town on it?
Uh, nice.
Uh, well, I had to try. Like, it's hard when you're like thinking about doing, because SpongeBob is down here, right? So if you have him do like a Canadian accent, I wasn't doing it really good, but
Oh,
yeah,
you mean
it's
Patrick,
good.
right?
Yeah, Patrick. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
Patrick, yeah.
not SpongeBob. What was I thinking?
No, I knew what you meant. I knew what you meant.
Yeah, but
Oh, I can't even try to do
oh man,
Yeah.
I can't even do that.
yeah.
I can't, it's not even close.
Uh, yeah, Patrick, not so, um, I have had authors who name characters after their friends and narrators or
Yeah.
authors. Um, my personal opinion on that is it depends on how they wrote that character.
Mhm.
If they wrote that character as similar to the actual person, or it seems like they're identifiable as a human,
Yeah.
then and you could possibly know what those ones sound like, you could try, but
Mhm.
again, the mimicry we had just talked about is not always accurate. The other thing is
We're
that, like
flattering.
yeah, usually they create a character and they have a whole persona to them, and then they just throw the name at them as an honorific, so it doesn't even match their personality or how they would talk or anything like that. So then there's no point in making them sound like that because it would seem so disjointed to the character. So my first goal is to make the characters sound real and believable, and if they sound real and believable and it sounds nothing like the author, I'm gonna go with that,
Yeah.
rather than try and force something to sound like the author that is gonna be so disjointed for the story that it wrecks it. Do you know what I mean?
So I one of the reasons I haven't done dropped the human by DJ Bodden thing is because the word that I'd never seen or heard out loud, panoply. I think I said panoply.
Mm,
And DJ is so meticulous. If you've ever read any of his stuff, he's so um calculated.
hmm,
His he has some of the most complex villains, and I would say that Eden Hudson has some of the most complex MCs. Um, just really good, broken, real people that, I mean, just tug at your heartstrings. And so being able to hear some of that stuff is so fun to hear what other people do with it.
yeah.
And for instance, though, listening to you doing Nathan's characters, who's in the chat here. um I liked what you did with those characters. You made them feel very familiar,
Hmm,
which is what you've got these guys that are living this D&D D20 roll life where, from what I understand, he rolled the stats, rolled the attacks, rolled the whole book.
yep.
And I the hopefully the great DM in the sky was keeping him honest. But I'll say, though, that being able to be a part of something like that and to be able to take characters that are supposed to feel like guys from back home, I mean, absolutely had to be a blast to read his stuff.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
and the sheriff exactly becoming more monstrous is,
Yeah.
evolving characters like that. That's so cool.
That sheriff, man, was that ever fun to play
Yeah.
with, and Nathan really was great in the fact that he gave m 1, he gave us such a great script to work with, and 2,
Hmm.
um, he hung out in the Discord a lot while we were recording the book, almost entirely, I think he was there for the whole thing. So, 1, that was great. If I had any questions or if I had anything that I was like, I'm not sure about this," I could ask him
Hash.
right there, and he was immediately ready
Yeah.
to with an answer. The other thing that it allowed us to do is be more collaborative on coming up with how these characters and I say actors, these, uh these people in the book, would sound, and I would go, "Ah, I kinda think that I wanna do this," and what it allowed me to do having him there was have the confidence to like, I'm saying this, and he goes, "Yes, I love it, let's go." So
Yeah.
then I had the freedom to suggest more risky things
Uh-huh.
because I if I'm on my own, when you're self-directing, it can be hard because you're like,
Mhm.
"I think I wanna go this far with her, I wanna do this," and then, uh, if you do, you run the risk of overselling it or overplaying it. And so we have a tendency sometimes to play it a bit more safe and back off on something that would have been brilliant had we
Yeah.
really pushed that envelope. But we feel like, oh, this might not be a right thing, so I'm gonna play it safe and not risk it. But when you have the author there going, no, 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 I love that. Go with it, run with it. That gives you the confidence to be like, okay, we're gonna try this. And
Yeah.
maybe sometimes you went a little bit too far, but you don't know where the line is until you go too far. And when they give you that, okay, yeah, here's the line, now you have the confidence to be able to move forward and really create something fun and interesting.
See, I was making jokes earlier. You're like, "How did you get into this? How do you handshake a 3-book deal with no background?" It's people like Nathan who just show up and they say, "Hey man, you let me know when you're ready. I'll write something just for you." I have um now now everyone's waiting. You have to write something for me. But
Yeah.
I don't mind auditioning and losing, if somebody else amazing shows up. But my one thing that I'll say for me is that because I have such a good relationship with these authors, I will never leverage that. I
Mm,
want them to be successful. I want them to do well. And if they can get Jeff Hayes or Travis or you, and that's what's right for that story, I cannot wait to hear it. And I objectively love these people, and
mhm.
and I love the opportunities that I get. But yes, DJ, go to the gym, go be swole. Yeah, if you can't give us 2 hours and 10 minutes of your time, TJ, why did you even show up?
Honestly,
We're doing this
honestly.
again tomorrow, so set aside some time. But I just want to say, for me, I said this earlier. This community's been incredible.
It really
You got
has.
Nathan does not promote his own stuff well either. Him and I make jokes all the time. It's like when I write something or do something, we're going to promote the crap out of each other because we don't. I don't know how to look and say, listen, I just did this and it's going to blow your freaking mind. You're going to
Mhm.
cry. You're going to wet yourself, and then you're going to drink your own tears, and you're going to cry again.
Well, when Nathan told me that he rolled the entire book, and so
Uh,
he would roll it, and then he would have to figure out a way to write the plot
yeah.
based on what they roll. So he's like, "Oh, shit, that character's dead? Alright, okay, so this is what we're gonna do." So that to me was such a fascinating part of
Yeah.
the book, and it made the book that much more interesting and compelling because you know
Thanks.
that what's happening in the story isn't just, oh, the author's gonna dictate what's happening
Yeah.
and make sure everything that everyone that wins is who he wanted to win, and he's gonna,
Mhm.
be the what do they call it? Plot safe or like, like
Yeah, plot armor.
plot armor, right? And
Yeah.
so that,
Thank you
moist,
for pinning that, Geneva.
moist. The,
Moist.
that was really awesome, and I was like, "You need to be telling people that, like, that should be a selling point for your book when you're letting people know, like, don't hide that,
Yeah.
that's huge." And so there was a lot of people in our Discord who were listening in while we were recording, and when they found that out, they're like, "That really does make me wanna listen to this book that much
Mhm.
more because that's really cool." And it lends a sense of danger and I don't know what's gonna happen, and we might lose somebody, and it might be, shocking, and it won't be just a paint by numbers kinda story because of that. Luckily, I had a coup de grace rule to save my butt once or twice, LOL, but it definitely changed the plans of certain characters as they reacted to as they raced to react. That's
Yeah,
really
sometimes you
cool.
get the wrong dice. You can't
Yeah.
kill off your MC in the middle of the book.
I don't know. It can work.
Yeah, it's
It's
true.
happened. It depends on how you do it, and then it also depends on how much you've made people care about your secondary characters,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's hugely important because a lot of people, they it becomes an issue where they spend so much time trying to develop their main character that their secondary characters are so two-dimensional that no one cares about them.
Yeah.
But if you have a great ensemble cast
Mhm.
even if the main character is really the lifeblood and the stream of the plot, but those secondary characters feel real and fleshed out, um, you've put it in a place where even if something really bad or tragic or even, God forbid, the main character dies, you're able to continue on with the series and people are still interested. I think that's a sign of great writing.
Yeah. Well, I think it's definitely time to wrap it up now. I have absolutely had, a
I feel
blast.
like I'm holding you hostage because you've tried to wrap it up like 14
No,
times, and
I
I'm
I
like,
just I
"Screw
don't know what
you, we're hanging
Geneva's
out."
doing. Like, I feel bad because she's kinda, like, running it. If it was just me and you, man, we do a 24-hour stream. Like, I feel like we would literally never run out of things to talk about.
No,
So,
I
but
I
I will
entirely
say
believe that.
I've been absolutely honored to have been here. I'm glad. Thank you for everybody that showed up. Steve, you're a rock star, man. I can't wait to hear more. And yeah, that's true. Yeah, all the
Yeah.
love you guys said. Now we have to figure out who's paying the check. This is going to be a few minutes. But I appreciate you and I appreciate your time. It means the world to me. I know they tried to find somebody cooler than me, but they couldn't. So you got,
Here, I
this
was
is
told that you were looking for somebody and you had about a dozen no's before like, "Okay, I'll take Steve Campbell."
no, no, not at all. No, literally the only person that I think we asked was Michael, but he's traveling.
Mhm.
So
But,
thank you.
Joe, it's been a
Oh,
blast, and it's been
great.
great to get to meet you and get to know you. It's one of those things where I know that we're gonna be able to continue getting
Yeah,
to know each other as things move forward because it's awesome. But, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing your career flourish and blossom
outstanding.
and for you to grow in the community as a narrator and not just a fan, because 'cause you've been a fan for a while.
Yeah, for years with
So
James Hunter. I wrote him when I read the first. It wasn't even lit RPG. It was actually one of his Yancey books. I read the first Yancey book, and
oh,
I just
wow.
pacing, and I was like, I like somebody that knows how to. Because sometimes you'll read like the Harry Dresden books or something like that, and you're exhausted.
Mhm.
Like, man, incredible books, but you are literally emotionally worn out by the time you finish those books. And I like the pacing of Yancey a little bit better. It was more enjoyable. I didn't feel like I needed to be in a certain mindset to read it. And I just wrote him, and it was really early in his career, so I was able to worm my way into his good graces, and here we are.
That's fantastic. That's
So
awesome. Nathan, I do plan to come to Dragon Con this year. Although
yeah,
my wife was like, since you've already been to Dragon Con, why don't this year you and I go to Paris instead? That would be so much more
Paris.
fun. And I tried to find a polite way to say, um, these are amazing friends that I have that I maybe get to see once a year if I'm lucky, and have a lot of fun talking about all the things that I love. And you want me to give that up to go to, she speaks French fluently, by the way. And you want me to go to a country where I don't speak a lick of the language.
Yeah.
You're going to be translating for me the entire time. And they take pride in the fact that they stick their noses up at anyone who doesn't know French. And they're going to be looking at me beside you and going, who is this fat American you have with you who can't even bother to learn our language? How dare you bring him here? He is disgusting. And I'm like, really? Thanks. That sounds like an awesome plan.
I like Nathan's response. You can just do a fake French accent and confuse the hell out of them all the time. Just speak in
Yeah, but I
English
think
with a bad French. Like, don't even try it. Just be like, oui, oui, mon
oui,
ami.
oui, monseigneur. It is bad to see you here, and I can't believe that you will not eat our escargot. And au revoir with you.
Spaghetti. Wait, that's
You
Italian, isn't it?
what is that? I fart in your general direction.
Ha
This is the original dialect, you French losers.
Oh, nice. All right. Well, we love you guys. Thank you guys so much for showing up. Steve, it's been incredible. Nathan, you're all right. Geneva, we love you. Thank you guys so much for your time. We appreciate you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.